Chapter 1633. Leaning on his shoulder, she said softly, "Muyaja, thank you. Thank you for understanding my stubbornness, thank you for understanding my decision." She leaned over, her soft and exquisite body pressing against his. Muyaja hugged her tightly, but purposely teased her. He lowered his head and kissed her red lips, asking back, "You? How do you plan to thank me?" Yun Shishir looked up, only to see him looking at her with a bit of passion and anticipation. Yun Shishir suddenly smiled, her bright eyes reflecting the gorgeous fireworks in the sky. Her smile was like a flower. Amidst the fireworks in the sky, she took the initiative to hook her arms around his neck. Her beautiful face leaned closer to him, and then, her sweet red lips gently pressed against his thin lips that were cold from the cold wind. The kiss deepened, gentle and charming. The crystal horse carriage drove through the romantic cherry blossom avenue. The passers-by looked up and saw an indescribably beautiful woman kissing a handsome man in the carriage. They all exclaimed in amazement, "Oh my God! Quick, look! Quick, look at the horse carriage! It's so romantic! I heard that Fairy Tale Valley has been booked by someone today, decorating it dreamily for the proposal ceremony, and it's open to tourists for free. Let the tourists witness it. Don't tell me it's the two people in the horse carriage. The woman is so beautiful, and the man is so handsome. Oh my God! They're so compatible." Under the witness of the crowd, under the beautiful and gorgeous fireworks, Yun Shishir hugged him, kissed him, and used the most intimate way to respond to him. Muyaja could not help but wrap his arms around her slim waist. His sexy lips curled into a slight smile. He was obviously very satisfied with her initiative. This kiss continued all the way to the main gate, and he was still reluctant to part. From the beginning, she took the initiative, until later, when she fell into his control, he kept attacking with impatient passion, attacking the city, unwilling to be separated from her. Yun Shishir was almost suffocated by his kiss. In a daze, she tried to force herself to sober up, but from the corner of her eyes, she saw that the horse carriage had already driven to the main gate, and the extended Bentley was waiting quietly at the gate. However, the driver standing in front of the car door did not dare to look directly at it, his head lowered, eyes and nose looking down, not daring to disturb them. She was even more embarrassed. Clenching her fist, she lightly punched his shoulder. But he was unmoved, not allowing her to escape. He held her neck tightly, forcing her lips to be closer to his, the tip of his tongue between her lips, constantly stealing her sweet breath. How long has it been since he tasted such deliciousness? He already could not remember. Kissing her, he could not stop. No. Yun Shishir was angry and embarrassed. This man, how could he not bear to stop once he started kissing her? There were so many people at the gate. Didn't he know he? From the corner of her eyes, Yun Shishir saw that many tourists were either stunned or heckling around the horse carriage, constantly raising the cameras in their hands, trying to capture such a romantic and beautiful scene. Wasn't this a little too high profile? Yun Shishir punched his shoulder, but before she could say anything to stop him, she felt the world spinning in front of her eyes. This man actually carried her in his arms and stepped out of the horse carriage. Chapter 1634. Yun Shishir saw the heat in his eyes. "You, Shu." Muyaja's voice was hoarse and dark, as if he was trying hard to suppress something. "Be good, don't talk." Her soft and bone-chilling voice was undoubtedly the most powerful aphrodisiac at this moment. If he wasn't careful, he would be completely ignited. He could still barely hold it in. Muyaja carried her and walked to the front of the car. The concierge opened the car door, and he hugged her and stepped into the car. Just as the car door closed, he pressed a button to raise the partition between the driver's seat and the back seat. The covetous look in his eyes made her feel an inexplicable fear. "Muyaja, you," before she could finish her sentence, he pushed her down onto the seat. Immediately after, his tall body pressed down on her. "Don't." She widened her eyes in panic and instinctively reached out to push him away. However, she was resisting, which aroused his desire to conquer her even more. When it came to matters of love, a man's desire to conquer would arise spontaneously from his bones. Moreover, he had to be in control of all the initiative. Even if she resisted, with her small strength, there was no way she could go against him. Moreover, she was going against the current Muyaja. As if he had gone mad, he covered her with his body and fiercely kissed her lips. Like a young man who had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, his kiss was impatient and predatory as he constantly sought her sweetness. Yun Shishir was almost unable to breathe from his kiss. She pushed his chest, but the man's heavy body was like Mount Tai, attacking her like a mountain toppling over. No matter how hard she tried, she still couldn't move an inch. Hey, Yun Shishir struggled uneasily, pushing him away and avoiding him. Muyaja suddenly pressed on her shoulders and opened his handsome eyes. She suddenly looked up and met his deep and endless eyes. The heat in his eyes fell on her face, as if it would burn her. He looked back at her. She stared at him, her eyes as helpless as a fawn's. Her charming eyes were like silk, and her beautiful peach blossom eyes were overflowing with light, rippling with gentle and beautiful emotions. Especially at this moment, it was as if her face was smeared with a layer of rouge. It was so damn charming. The sight of her caused him to feel as if a wave of terrifying numbness was spreading along a certain part of his body, causing his tendons and bones to soften and spread throughout his entire body. He wished for nothing more than to ruthlessly eat her up at this very moment. Looking into his dark eyes, it was as if there were two flames burning fiercely, as if they were going to devour her soul. However, in the end, he managed to maintain his last bit of rationality. Muyaja tried his best to control himself, suppressing the impulses in his body that were ready to explode. He hugged her, but he did not dare to move anymore. Hugging her tightly, his heavy breaths echoed in her ears, one after another, like a ferocious beast eyeing its prey, constantly letting out heavy breaths. She was shy and helpless as he pinned her under his body. Similarly, she did not dare to make any rash movements. She was afraid that if she wasn't careful, she would agitate him instead. Separated by a thin layer of clothing, she could easily feel the change in a certain part of his body. At this moment, it was already as hot as iron. She didn't dare to move even more. Her face was flushed red, and she was so shy that her face and ears were red. What was this? She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This man was actually so. Chapter 1635. Muyaja hugged her even tighter. Every minute and second felt like an eternity of torture. His tense body was screaming, and the fire in his body was raging. Every second he endured, his breathing became heavier. Who knew what he was enduring? Enduring wasn't his style. If it were in the past, he would have wanted to skin her alive and integrate her into his bones and blood. However, he was afraid of scaring her. He knew very well that this woman did not like to do it in the car. So, to take care of her feelings, he had to endure until they reached the hotel. However, enduring like this was really torturous and painful. The thin layer of sweat on his forehead was seeping from his skin, silently telling her how much pain he was in. Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry, and her heart ached. After not seeing her for half a month, he really missed her. Whether it was his body or his heart. Damn it, he missed her. From his tense body and the fiery temperature, she could feel how hard this man was enduring at this moment. She hugged him tightly, and her heart could not bear to see him like this. Therefore, she held his handsome face lovingly and kissed him encouragingly between his eyebrows. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Thank you for doing so much for her. Thank you for giving in and changing for her." He used to be such a proud man, but for her, he kept changing and giving in. "Kiss me." His dark eyes were burning brightly as he stared at her face and said to her. Yun Shishir smiled and kissed his thin lips. However, he was not satisfied. He kissed her lips deeply, as if he could use this to cool down his burning body and mind. Unexpectedly, this kiss was so inseparable that they kissed all the way. When the car stopped at the entrance of the hotel, he hugged her. The person in his arms was already in a daze from his kiss, and she did not know where she was from. When they were outside the car, the chauffeur gently knocked on the car window and said carefully, "CEO Mu, we've arrived." Only then did the two people in the car wake up. He left her lips, only to see her face in a daze. Her face was tender and naive, but it made her even more charming. She, on the other hand, felt a little dizzy from his kiss. When she left his lips, her eyes were slightly narrowed and the world was spinning in front of her eyes. His kissing skills were improving day by day, and in front of him, she was like a pitiful newbie. She was still a little inexperienced and was controlled by him, allowing him to dominate her. He couldn't help but smile as he lightly patted her face. "We're here, little fool." Yun Shusher was still in a daze. She opened her eyes and looked around. When she pulled open the curtains, she realized that the car had stopped. She asked dizzily, "Where is this?" "Hotel." Just as he finished speaking, before she could regain her senses, he pulled her into his arms and got out of the car. She let out a soft, "ah." At the entrance of the hotel, rows of waiters stood respectfully. Under everyone's gaze, he carried her in his arms and walked through the door grandly. Once again, Yun Shusher was so embarrassed that her face was burning red. Why was this man so high profile? Couldn't he keep a lower profile? If other people saw him carrying her like this, what would they think? She gently hit his shoulders and said softly, "Hey, can you put me down? I can walk on my own." Chapter 1636. He loved her dearly. Seeing her in a daze, her body limp and weak without any energy, how could she walk? But if Yun Shusher knew what the man was thinking at that moment, she would roll her eyes again. Heavens, just how precious was she in his heart? He couldn't even bear to walk a few steps. Sometimes, it really wasn't an exaggeration. In front of this man, her pair of legs were just like decorations. They were purely for looks and had no practical use at all. But if he could do that, Mu Yaja was willing to carry her like this all the time. He couldn't wait for her to grow on his body. Haha. If Yun Shusher knew what he was thinking, she would probably not know whether to laugh or cry. He carried her and got out of the car. As if he didn't see the embarrassment on her face, he hugged her and strode towards the hotel with big steps. When the 2 rows of concierges saw him, they all lowered their heads and bowed in unison. All of them kept their heads down and didn't dare to look up. With the concierge leading the way, he carried her into the elevator. Under her many requests, he finally put her down. However, she didn't know if it was because she had been pressed down by him for a long time, but the moment her feet touched the ground, she went limp and almost fell to the ground. She managed to support him and barely managed to stand firm. The man looked at her, but there was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. He stretched out his long arm and wrapped it around her slender waist. His strong arm firmly supported her and lifted her body up a little. The elevator door slowly closed. At that moment, only the 2 of them were left in the narrow space. The quieter the space, the clearer the sound of the man's covetous breathing could be heard. It was heavy and deep, rising and falling one after another. It was obvious that he had endured to the point where he was on the verge of exploding. Yun Shusher held onto his arm and could clearly feel his tense muscles. She didn't know why, but she inexplicably felt her legs go limp. Her face and ears were red as she thought about how this man had suppressed himself for so long. She didn't know what kind of storm she would have to face next. Because of that, she felt a little uneasy and didn't know what to do. The hotel building was 30 stories high. The suite he booked was on the 28th floor. The floor numbers jumped and the elevator continued to climb. At the same time, the temperature in the elevator also rose. Yun Shusher sensed that his body was getting hotter and hotter, and she silently wanted to hide to the side. However, he immediately noticed her subtle movement and abruptly grabbed her waist. He snorted, "What are you hiding for? I won't eat you." Would it eat her up? She couldn't help but question his words. This man was truly a monster. It was as if he had an inexhaustible amount of energy, and he never felt tired at all. How could he be so powerful? She had heard that most men would only be able to last one night in bed before they would be exhausted. However, this man only needed to recharge his energy for a short period of time, take a shower, and change into a suit. Then, he would return to his work in high spirits with the demeanor of an elite of the empire. Wasn't he tired? Or was he born with great physical strength? According to her observation, this was under the condition that he was conservative. Every time he still had some reservations in bed, she was already being tormented to the point where she was about to fall apart. If he didn't hold back, what would happen? Ah. Chapter 1637. Yun Shishir couldn't control herself from letting her imagination run wild. When she came back to her senses, she clenched her fists tightly. She was secretly annoyed at herself for thinking of such a dirty question. On one hand, she forced herself to stop thinking about it. On the other hand, she was extremely curious about this man's physical potential. Was he too strong, or was she too weak? This was a problem. As Yun Shishir thought about it, she blushed and pursed her lips. She felt that her moral integrity was almost eaten up. She could even seriously probe into such a question. She really didn't know shame. Muyaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and saw that her cheeks were flushed red. She was secretly sizing him up while holding her burning hot face. She looked like she didn't know what to do. He didn't know what kind of nonsense was going on in this little head of hers. There was obviously something wrong with her expression. Hence, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" His sudden voice had startled her. She suddenly raised her head and shook her head guiltily. She hurriedly said, "I'm not thinking about any messy questions." Muyaja squinted his eyes suspiciously. She was giving herself away. This stupid woman. He didn't say anything, but she was so nervous. Her words were obviously trying to cover it up. Yun Shishir had just finished her words when she suddenly realized what she meant by not thinking about any messy questions. She had said such strange words and it would only make him more suspicious. She was so embarrassed that she was about to die. She was as childish and ridiculous as a child. Perhaps it was because she wasn't a match for this man. She had never been good at hiding her thoughts. If there was anything, she didn't know how to hide it properly. Hence, she had become a joke to him. He suddenly closed in on her and wrapped his arms tightly around her waist. Step by step, he pressed on. "Tell me honestly. What kind of nonsense are you thinking about?" I'm really not thinking about any nonsense," the more Yun Shishir said, the less confident she was. Even she wouldn't believe what she said. As for this man, his skills were so much higher than hers. Obviously, he wouldn't believe what she said. Hence, he leaned over slightly and got closer to her face. Sticking close to her ear, he said seductively, "Say it. Otherwise, I'll do you right now." His words were obviously laced with danger. Yun Shishir suddenly looked up and met his threatening eyes. She flew into a rage out of humiliation. "You! I didn't just say that." Muyaja smiled like an experienced hunter. His elegance and calmness were akin to that of a prey trapped in the palm of his hand. Moreover, he was full of interest. Yun Shishir got even angrier. However, under his threat, she lowered her head and said unwillingly, "Nothing much. I'm just curious about one thing, that's all." "What?" She took a deep breath. "You never seem to get tired." Muyaja was stunned. Suddenly, he was amused by her serious look. He immediately guessed what she was secretly probing. "What are you laughing at?" "You little fool. You're too weak." The elevator door opened. He took her hand and strode into the room. He walked so fast that she stumbled behind him, unable to keep up. Muyaja. Chapter 1638. Don't, the door wasn't closed yet. However, what she got in return was the man's kiss. It was as if at this moment, the emotions that had been suppressed for a long time had finally been released. For the past half a month, including the journey from Fairy Tale Valley to the hotel, he had been trying his best to restrain himself so that at this moment, he would not hold back at all. He lowered his head, pressed down on her shoulders, and kissed her deeply. The ferocious and predatory energy was comparable to when they were in the car just now. In fact, it was even more ferocious. Even though she repeatedly cried out in surprise, she could not resist him. He pressed his lips against hers and swallowed all of her resistance and rejection into his stomach. Previously, to take care of her, he had tolerated himself. However, now that they were here, it was the world where he could do whatever he wanted. He did not need to care about those trivial matters, and he did not need to suffer any more. Now, he only needed to think about how to properly taste her goodness. In an instant, he had filtered out more than 10 positions in his mind. Just as his fingertips touched her skin, he felt a burning sensation and kissed her fiercely. In the past half a month, he had missed her so much that he had missed her so much. He was also surprised that he could actually control himself and not fly to the set to look for her. This woman had a unique charm. Once he had tasted her, he would never forget her. No matter what, he would always be able to recall her sweetness. In this world, other than her, there was probably no other woman who could be so compatible with him. As he kissed her, it was as if he was reminded of the time when he had her. That carefree and unrestrained feeling was still vivid in his mind. When he touched her, it was as if he was bewitched and could not get rid of it. Door. As Yun Shishir struggled, she tried her best to remind him that he seemed to have something that he had not done. However, Mu Yaja was a little impatient. His long arms stretched out and with a click, the door was successfully closed as she wished. When she saw this, she heaved a sigh of relief. In the next second, she was lifted into the air. He actually reached out and his strong arm held her up steadily. At this moment, she was facing him with her back against the entryway, but her whole body was lifted into the air by him. Look at me, Mu Yaja reached out a hand and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. Look at me. Yun Shishir looked at him and her gaze froze. Stupid woman, you should concentrate now. He was a little dissatisfied that she was distracted by unimportant things, so there was some displeasure in his eyes. All of your time tonight belongs to me. After saying that, he steadied her and withdrew from her. The emotions that he had been suppressing for a long time were already clamoring to the extreme. With a ferocious ferocity, he practically charged straight into her. He didn't give her any room to breathe. He pressed her down and took her for himself. Ferocious, he was as ferocious as a wild beast. He wanted her, 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 he wanted her. Even though she was prepared for it, she was still frightened by such a shocking impact. After he was done, he panted heavily and hugged her, not willing to let go. Holding her in his arms, he walked to the living room, sat on the sofa, and continued what he had yet to enjoy. Chapter 1639. The battle lasted until midnight, but the man was still not satisfied. He fully displayed his seemingly inexhaustible stamina, and it was as if he wanted to use this night to vent all his longing for her for the past half a month. When he was aroused, he kept calling her name, and she kept responding to him. At first, she tried her best to cooperate with him, but later on, she was so tired that she gradually lost her stamina. The battle was close to madness, and the smoke of gunpowder filled every corner of the bedroom. She only felt that the world had gone crazy. The sky was spinning, and the earth was moving. The whole world seemed to be collapsing, and the earth was shaking. All her rationality was ethereal, and it was difficult for her to return to her shell. Her mind was filled with the thought that he had gone crazy. And she, too, had gone crazy. They had both gone crazy. It was as if their bodies no longer belonged to them. Their bodies were dripping with sweat, and it was sticky. It felt as if the two of them had been fished out of a pool. Outside the door, the two little lads were curiously leaning against the door. They originally wanted to sneak around and find out what was going on. However, they were helpless as the soundproofing of the hotel was really amazing. The two of them wanted to stick their ears to the door, but they still couldn't hear anything. Sigh, forget it. Yu suddenly snorted and said, I listened to your nonsense, and that's why I came to do such a thing with you. Eavesdropping on Daddy and Mommy is too despicable. If Daddy finds out, he'll be angry again. Xiao Yichen felt wronged and said, "Boo-hoo, you were the one who wanted to steal, shut up." Yu Yu blushed and covered his mouth. He said anxiously, "If you continue to talk nonsense, I'll ignore you." "Okay. I won't talk nonsense anymore. I wanted to eavesdrop, so I pulled you along." As an older brother, Xiao Yichen naturally gave in to him, so he couldn't be bothered to argue with him. Yu Yu was satisfied. He pursed his lips and looked at Xiao Yichen with a smile. He opened his palm and said, "Okay. Let's go back to the room to rest." Okay. Xiao Yichen held his hand, and the two little rascals held hands as they returned to their room to rest. It was late at night outside the window. With a deep groan from the man, the two of them climbed up the gorgeous clouds. At this time, the two bodies lying on the bed were already soaked in hot sweat. Towards the end, he suddenly grabbed her cheeks and kissed her seductive little mouth. Ugh! Yunshish's cries were all overbearingly swallowed by him. With the last bit of strength, he completely relaxed his tense body and laid on top of her, panting heavily and rapidly. The man's sexy and deep breathing kept echoing in her ears. His warm breath brushed against her ear, making her feel itchy, but she was powerless to resist. After that, she was completely paralyzed in his arms, unable to move at all. And the important responsibility of dealing with the aftermath naturally fell on him. After Muyaja calmed down, he couldn't help but scratch the bridge of her nose. Little rascal. This stupid woman. Throughout the whole process, he was the one who put in the effort. What about her? After everything was over, she was like a little rascal who only knew how to act shamelessly. She was paralyzed in his arms and didn't want to move at all. But it wasn't her fault. Chapter 1640. When he calmed his breathing, she was still panting heavily. One after another, it was as if the surrounding air was extremely thin and she was almost unable to breathe. It was as if he was trying his best to fill it up, but no matter what, he felt that it was not enough. Under his enlightenment, her body seemed to have turned into a puddle of spring water. Muyaja hugged her and walked into the bathroom. He filled the bathtub with warm water and sank her into the water, letting the two of their bodies submerge in it. When he calmed down, he liked to hold her like this. Then, he would quietly admire her beauty. Yunshisher nestled in his arms, her left face quietly pressed against his chest. The hair on her face was soaked with sweat and messily stuck to her face. However, after hundreds of years, it did not affect her pure beauty in the slightest. Her beauty was a kind of otherworldly beauty that did not hide a trace of dirt. At this moment, her eyes were half closed and there was a trace of drifting in her eyes. Her long and thick eyelashes drooped down, covering her eyelids with a layer of shadow. Her eyelashes were moistened with sweat and there were a few droplets of mist standing on them, making this beauty even more ethereal. He secretly thought in his heart that if it was in the ancient times, she would definitely be an evil concubine that would bring disaster to the country. She would definitely be the kind of beauty that would cause chaos in the imperial court. So much so that for him who had always had a firm heart, in that moment, a cold thought suddenly floated in his mind: he might as well just die on top of her. Muyaja helped her clean up and at the same time, he still could not control himself from entangling with her lips. Yunshisher, however, was enjoying his gentle intimacy. She hooked her arms around his shoulders and responded to his kiss. Occasionally, she would stick out the tip of her tongue and poke him. Muyaja originally wanted to teach her a lesson, but just as he carried her upright, this pitiful little woman was so wronged that she was begging for mercy. "I really can't do it today. I will be killed by you here. Let me go, please. I don't want it. I really can't want it anymore." Seeing her so pitiful, Muyaja showed mercy and dispelled the thought. After the two of them had taken a shower, he wiped her clean and carried her back to the bedroom. After getting on the bed, Yunshisher comfortably rested her head on his arm and fell asleep soundly. This sleep was peaceful and steady, and it was actually a dreamless sleep. Early in the morning, he was woken up by the urgent ringing of the phone in the living room. Yun Shishir was still sleepy, but Mu Yaja was suddenly woken up. He put on a bathrobe and walked to the living room. He saw that it was Yun Shishir's phone ringing in her handbag. He picked up the phone and heard Qin Zhou's voice on the other end. Shishir. Where are you? Yesterday, the crew found out that it was your birthday and wanted to celebrate with you, but you disappeared without a trace. Mu Yaja's brows sank slightly when he heard the manager's voice. She's with me. These 5 words were a high-profile declaration of sovereignty. In his eyes, Qin Zhou was undoubtedly a big love rival. It was a heinous crime to divide up the time that they spent together. Before Yun Shishir could respond, Qin Zhou heard Mu Yaja's deep voice and was so shocked that he almost threw his phone away. After a short moment of shock, Qin Zhou laughed. Chairman Mu. Haha. So Shishir is with you. I'm relieved. Shishir is now. She's still sleeping. Chapter 1641. The words "too tired" left enough room for one's imagination to run wild. The corners of his lips twitched. He could almost guess the reason behind her "too tired." They hadn't seen each other for more than half a month. They must have been busy until late last night. Qin Zhou looked down and cleared his throat. Then, he said awkwardly, "Okay. Then. I won't disturb Chairman Mu's rest. By the way, please send my regards to Yun Shishir on my behalf. Happy birthday." Mu Yaja, however, replied, "You can say that to her face. I'm never in charge of passing on messages." Qin Zhou, his tone was so harsh early in the morning. Just a few words and it was full of tension. It seemed like he was implying that he was blaming him for making her schedule too full. There was clearly a hidden meaning in his words. Qin Zhou awkwardly exchanged a few more words before hanging up the phone. After giving it some thought, he realized that he had indeed made her schedule too full recently. After reflecting on it, he made another call to rearrange her schedule. Mu Yaja hung up the phone and returned to his room. In the afternoon, Yun Shishir was jolted awake by the noisy ringtone of her phone. She abruptly woke up from the ringing of the bell. She opened her eyes and heard the ringing of the bell. She turned her head and realized that the phone in her handbag had unknowingly been placed next to her pillow. She calmed her disturbed state of mind. Just as she raised her hand and was about to grab her phone, she was suddenly shocked by the feeling of accounting coming from the joints of her arm. TSK. It's so sore. Yun Shishir frowned and mumbled. She endured the pain and picked up the phone. Yun Yeching's apologetic voice came from the other end. Shishir, are you free this afternoon? This afternoon. Yun Shishir looked around the room. Only then did she recall the madness last night and where she was at the same time. The curtains in the room were closed, so she could not see the weather outside the window, nor could she tell what time it was. However, based on her sense of time, she knew that it was very late. When she turned around, the side of the bed was already empty. She didn't know when the man had left. From this, she could deduce that it was already late. Yun Shishir held her phone and her face suddenly turned pale. She remembered that she had a scene this afternoon. Only then did Yun Shishir remember that she still had to film a scene today. Yesterday, her scene with Hua Jin had not been completed. Logically speaking, she still had to shoot another scene today. And now, it must be almost noon, right? Oh my God. She had slept so deeply that she had wasted so much time. Why didn't that man remember to wake her up? She had a lot of work to do in the afternoon. She didn't know if she could make it in time. Shishir. On the other end, Yun Yeching's voice snapped her out of her daze. Yun Shishir suddenly came back to her senses and smiled. Daddy, I'm listening. I should be able to get to the train station this afternoon. However, I have a lot of luggage, so it's not very convenient. So, I wanted to ask if you have time to come over and help your uncle. After saying this, he paused for a moment before quickly adding, "It's okay if you're really busy. If you really can't make it, you can take a taxi back. Yun Shishir was a little conflicted. She had a scene in the afternoon. However, she really couldn't bear to see her father rushing, so she asked, "What time will you reach the station in the afternoon?" Chapter 1642. All right. Don't worry, give me a call when you arrive, and I'll come over to pick you up. Do you have anything on in the afternoon? If you have something to say, then just let it go. The man persisted, still thinking of her best interests. Yun Shishir laughed. What can I have on? Dad, don't worry. I'm free this afternoon. He smiled, feeling touched by her thoughtfulness. After giving her a few more words of advice, he hung up the phone. She looked at the time and saw that it was 11:30 p.m. Hence, she hurriedly dialed Director Gu's number. She wanted to ask when the afternoon shoot would end, but the man politely said, "Shishir, it was your birthday yesterday. I wanted to arrange for everyone in the production team to celebrate your birthday, but unfortunately, I don't know where you went afterward. Since it's your birthday, I'll give you 2 days off. Have a good rest today and tomorrow. Report to the production team the day after tomorrow." The man's kind words gave her a huge shock. To be honest, she was a little dumbfounded. In reality, she had called Gu Xiaoyang to ask for a day off, but when she thought about how she had left the set without permission yesterday, she braced herself for a harsh scolding. Trembling with fear, she waited for Gu Xiaoyang to give her a good scolding. After all, the production team clearly stated that no one was allowed to leave the set without permission. It was the same as clocking in at work, one was not allowed to leave without permission. Yesterday, she had left the set without saying a word. Logically speaking, Director Gu would definitely criticize her for speaking on her own. He would also give her an appropriate punishment. In the end, he would make an announcement to the entire set to punish her as an example to others. However, he didn't expect Gu Xiaoyang to be so reasonable after this phone call. He even approved 2 days of leave. 2 days of leave. Did the sun rise from the west? This was a rather luxurious treatment that only A-list stars or protagonists could enjoy. Yun Shishir was ecstatic. Although she had an unfinished scene and felt a little uncomfortable with the unfinished work hanging there, these few days were indeed too tiring for her. She needed time to rest properly. After half a month of continuous filming, she was already exhausted. She had applied for leave several times, but the director did not approve it. She did not expect to be granted leave today. Yun Shishir was so excited that she couldn't calm down. She put down her phone, sat up, and lifted the quilt to get out of bed. However, just as she lifted the quilt, she suddenly saw the ambiguous marks on her body. Especially the base of her thighs, there were actually bruises. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't even show her face. Her skin was very white and tender. Even if she was casually pinched without using any strength, it would leave an eye-catching mark. Not to mention the unrestrained battle last night. When she thought of this, Yun Shishir felt extremely embarrassed. When she got off the bed, the moment her toes touched the ground, she almost fell down. Oh God, her thighs were sore and swollen, and her waist was so soft. She didn't know what had happened to her body after that night. When he got off the bed, his whole body was in a daze, and there was even a faint feeling of lack of oxygen. Rather than saying that he was crushed by the wheels, it would be more appropriate to say that his entire body felt like it was falling apart. At this moment, even moving his arms was strenuous. Yun Shishir calmed down, gently massaged her waist, took a deep breath, and got off the bed. Chapter 1643. Pushing open the door, she was greeted with a room filled with warm sunlight. The sun was shining brightly outside the window. This was a luxurious suite that included a small business conference room, a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a study room. Yun Shishir put on a bathrobe and walked into the study room. She saw Muyaja sitting in front of the computer, staring intently at the screen. He was so focused that he didn't realize that Yun Shishir was standing behind him. It was only when she leaned against his back and wrapped her arms around his shoulders that he suddenly realized that she had entered the room without him knowing. "Are you busy?" Yin Shishir rested her chin on his shoulder and looked at the computer screen in front of him, only to realize, to her annoyance, that the files on the screen were actually a series of densely packed financial reports. Just looking at them gave her a headache. It turned out that he was dealing with the company's quarterly financial reports. She said guiltily, "Did I disturb you?" Muyaja smiled and patted the back of her hand gently. His voice was gentle as he asked, "Why don't you rest for a while? If you continue sleeping, it'll be night soon." Yin Shishir paused and laughed. "Why didn't you wake me up when you were awake?" Muyaja raised his eyebrows and said innocently, "I saw that you were sleeping soundly and even snoring like a little pig. That's why I didn't wake you up." Snoring? Yin Shishir was shocked. She was shocked and retorted with a red face, "You're talking nonsense. I never snore when I sleep. Why didn't you snore?" Muyaja wanted to tease her, though, so he said in all seriousness, "You're snoring really badly. Like a little pig. When I called you, you even smacked your lips. You don't look like a lady at all." She panicked. He was so serious that Yin Shishir believed his words without a doubt. She really thought that she really snored when she slept. Oh my God. She snored? It was so embarrassing to snore when sleeping. In her impression, snoring while sleeping was a coarse behavior that only middle-aged men would have. She had always valued her bearing. When she thought about how she had actually snored and let this man hear it, for a moment, she only felt her cheeks burning. It was incomparably embarrassing. Feeling conflicted, Yin Shishir bit her lower lip. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Pouting, she carefully defended herself. "Actually, it's normal for people to snore sometimes. Sometimes, when people are too tired, they will snore when they sleep, don't." Halfway through her words, she felt embarrassed. She wanted to say that he didn't mind her. Muyaja, on the other hand, was tickled by his earnest attempt to absolve himself. Thus, he raised his hand and couldn't help but pinch the tip of her nose as he teased, "You're not just snoring. I really want to take a picture of how ugly you look when you sleep." "Huh? What's wrong with me?" "What do you mean not only? What's wrong with me?" Muyaja nodded seriously. "Yes. Does drooling count with drooling? Boom, wait a minute." Yin Shishir's face flushed red. Why was she drooling? Yin Shishir was so shocked that she instinctively touched her mouth, but she didn't feel any saliva stains. Chapter 1644. Muyaja slapped her hand away. "Stop touching. When I woke up in the morning, your saliva was all over my arm. I used a towel to wipe it clean for you." He said it so seriously that Yin Shishir believed him even more. With a dejected look, she said, Why was I salivating? I really don't know." As she said that, she bit her lips in annoyance and cried out in her heart. It's over. Her ugly sleeping state was actually seen by this man. Yin Shishir was very concerned about her image in his heart. Salivating and snoring. Why was she like those middle-aged men who picked their feet when she was asleep? Seeing her reaction, Muyaja found it cute and interesting. He couldn't help but curve his lips and snigger. Yin Shishir heard him snickering and looked at him suspiciously. Alas, he was quick to restrain himself. By the time he looked at her, his smile had already disappeared and he was looking at her with a straight face. He did not know how to laugh at all. I might really be too tired. I hope you don't mind." However, Muyaja harumphed coldly. "Salivating and snoring. I can tolerate that. But do you know that talking in your sleep in the middle of the night, rolling up the blanket, and even kicking people? That's really too much." Yin Shishir widened her eyes in shock and looked at him in disbelief. "That's impossible. When I'm sleeping, I'm quite well behaved. I've never kicked people or talked in my sleep." Her. Rolling up the blanket was especially too much. "When I woke up in the middle of the night, the blanket on my body was gone." As he said that, Muyaja sighed helplessly. I really don't know how badly you tormented me last night. Yin Shishir bit her lips. She really wanted to cry but had no tears. She really didn't know that she had so many bad habits when she was asleep. Muyaja even sneezed according to the situation, scaring Yin Shishir so much that she didn't know what to do. Are you alright? It's fine. Muyaja frowned. She probably caught a cold. When Yin Shishir heard this, she felt even more regretful. She wrapped her arms around his and said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I really didn't know my sleeping posture was so bad. That was because I had always slept alone. You had never said that when I slept with him in the past. That's why I didn't know I had a bad sleeping posture. When Muyaja heard this, he laughed in his heart, but on the surface, he pretended to be noble and cold, ignoring her. Yin Shishir was even more frightened, thinking that what he said was true. She said pitifully, Did you catch a cold? If I catch a cold, I'll feel guilty. Just as she was racking her brains to come up with a way to smooth things over, the man's lips curled into a smile as he suddenly wrapped his arms around her waist. In just a split second, he had her in his embrace. Lowering his head to look at her, he lovingly planted a kiss on her cheek. Her. Little idiot, no matter how bad your sleeping posture is, I like it. Yin Shishir was stunned. Looking at the playful look in his eyes, she suddenly reacted. Pointing at him, she complained, You weren't teasing me just now, were you? You just realized. Muyaja moved his face closer to hers. The playful smile in his eyes had a tinge of naughtiness as their noses touched. I like to tease you. He liked to see her flustered and helpless, like an anxious little bunny. Chapter 1645. This was probably one of the few disgusting interests that he could enjoy. Yin Shishir punched him hard, but even though she used a lot of strength, it did not hurt him at all. He could not help but laugh. To him, this little fellow's strength was not worth mentioning at all. Muyaja, why are you so bad? You actually lied to me and said that my sleeping posture was bad, hey? Do you know that I almost believed you? Yin Shishir felt extremely wronged. She had actually been so stupid to believe his words and even seriously consider how to explain herself. But she did not expect that he was just teasing her. She was extremely unhappy. Why did she feel so stupid and gullible? Was it fun to tease her? Muyaja rubbed the tip of her nose and asked gently, Why are you getting out of bed now? I saw that you were so tired yesterday. Why don't you rest for a while more? His words fell into her ears, but they were extremely ambiguous. Seeing that she was so tired, his words made her recall the crazy scene from last night and her face became even hotter. She pushed him away and stood up from his body. She was afraid that he would see her blushing face and tease her again. So she walked to the bedside and pushed the window open slightly to let the breeze in from outside to cool down her burning face a little. Muyaja sat on the chair and turned around. He found it funny and said, What's the matter? Feeling shy? No way. Yin Shishir turned around and glared at him. Stop teasing me, okay? He smiled and nodded, restraining himself a little. He knew that this stupid woman was especially thin-skinned. Some jokes should be stopped when appropriate. If they went overboard, even a rabbit would bite when anxious. Yin Shishir suddenly asked, Are you free this afternoon? Yes. Muyaja replied. Actually, he still had a few cases to deal with in the afternoon. However, one of the standards of being a wife's slave was that whenever she asked if he was free or if he had time, it meant that she had something to do. Therefore, even if he had something to do, he had to answer yes. If he couldn't finish the case, he could leave it for tomorrow. He wasn't in a hurry anyway. She was number one. If Yin Shishir knew about this, she would definitely be touched to death. However, as a man, he would definitely want to save face. He couldn't let her know that he had rejected several cases for her. If she found out, she might secretly feel proud of herself. Seeing that he was free, Yin Shishir asked, Can you come with me to pick someone up this afternoon? Who? My father. Yun Shishir smiled. He's coming back to Beijing today. He'll arrive at the train station in the afternoon. It should be around 4 o'clock. If you're free, come with me to pick him up. Mu Yaja smiled. Okay, I'll accompany you. When Yun Shishir heard this, she was in a good mood. However, she suddenly thought of something and asked again, Are you really free this afternoon? I see that you are usually very busy. I happen to be free this afternoon. Okay. Love you. She hugged him by the shoulders and gave him a kiss before running to the bedroom to report to her father on the phone. Shishir, can you prepare 2 cars this afternoon? No problem. Do you have a lot of luggage? It's like this. Chapter 1646. Yun Shishir was taken aback by his words. Yun Yeching found a secluded place and explained his purpose for coming. It turned out that Yun Yeho had initially refused to go to the capital for no other reason than that he knew what his wife was up to. She wanted to make use of this opportunity to escape from this destitute place and, by basking in Yun Yeching's limelight, secure a good job for her 2 daughters in the city. If she could find a decent job in the city, it would be a glorious thing. This job, however, was another matter altogether. She was mainly thinking that if she could find a wealthy husband for her 2 daughters in the city, then she wouldn't have to worry about the rest of her life. Furthermore, with Yun Yeching in the city, she would not have to work so hard to serve him. She even planned to find a second love and marry another man in the city. After all, she was still young in her 40s. She could not let Yun Yeho drag her down for the rest of her life. If she could marry another man, she would decisively kick away the crippled Yun Yeho and live a happy life of her own. Women, after all. Husband and wife were birds in the same forest, but they would fly away in the face of disaster. Moreover, there was a saying that went, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Yun Yeho was crippled and had lost his ability to work. He would have to rely on others to take care of him for the rest of his life. She did not want to be a coolie, so she naturally had the idea of looking for a better job. How could he not see through her thoughts? After being married for so many years, he had long figured out what she was thinking. Moreover, he was now crippled, so his mind was very sensitive. When a person reached this stage, they would be able to see things and people clearly. It was especially so at this time that one could see through people's hearts. Therefore, he did not want to be a burden to Yun Yeching, so he repeatedly emphasized that he would stay in his hometown and not go to the capital. Alas, no matter how his wife and daughters persuaded him, he would not waver. His wife was almost angered to death by him. In the end, it was Yun Yeching who came to persuade him. He told him, "Brother, I'm bringing you to the capital so that I can take better care of you. It's been hard on you these past few decades, I'm the one who made you suffer. You don't have to worry about whether going to Shangjing will bring me any burden or trouble. This isn't something you should be worried about. Moreover, you're my younger brother. This is what I should do. Don't tell me you want me to leave you at home and watch you suffer. How can I, as your older brother, stand by and watch? I've seen everything you've done for the past few decades. When I was in my prime, you quietly took care of my old mother for me. When I was down and out, you secretly came to the capital and gave me your hard-earned money. And these past few decades, you've been fulfilling filial piety on my behalf. You've been responsible for so many years. You've been responsible for so many things that you shouldn't be responsible for. Now that you can't bear it anymore, it's time for me, your older brother, to take responsibility for you. Mother is no longer here, and you are one of the few things I care about in this world. Come with me to the capital and let me take good care of you. Now that life is better, and Shishir is also working hard, I have nothing to worry about other than you." Chapter 1647. Ah ho, don't say such things. In any case, I've already made up my mind to bring you back to the capital. You don't have to throw a tantrum, just listen to my arrangements. Yun Yeho was touched by this, but he could not say anything about it. Now that Yun Yeching was bringing Yun Yeho to the capital, his troublesome wife and 2 daughters would, of course, follow suit. As a result, Xiang Yu and her 2 daughters had packed their bags and followed him excitedly to the capital to enjoy life. As mentioned earlier, when Yun Yeho was young, he worked at a construction site and earned enough money to build a new house in his hometown. After building the new house, he married his wife and gave birth to a pair of daughters. What happened in the end? Although they were not rich at first, they still led a stable life. Man proposes, God disposes. Yun Yeho got injured while working and became half paralyzed. With his pillar of support collapsing, the burden of living naturally fell on his wife's shoulders. She had a seriously ill mother-in-law and a half-paralyzed husband at home. Logically speaking, if he got injured at the construction site, it would be considered a work injury and he should be compensated. Alas, the contractor ran away with the workers' hard-earned money and could not be found. Not to mention compensation, he did not even get a single cent of his salary. As a result, he could only enjoy some subsidies from the village and rely on the few acres of farmland at home for his income. His wife was willing to work hard without complaint at first, but as time passed, she began to complain. Others were gradually leading better lives, but what about her? It was bad enough that her husband was useless, but he even became half-paralyzed while working at the construction site. Was this not equivalent to living as a widow? Not to mention earning money, she could not even live a normal life as a married couple. Although she had 2 daughters, she was not even 40 years old. She was at the age when she needed to live a life as a married couple. Now that she was half-paralyzed, she was practically a widow. This was even better. During the day, she had to farm outside, and when she returned, she had to take care of a seriously ill mother-in-law. Yun Yeho, who was bedridden, also needed to be taken care of. Gradually, her complaints increased. As a woman, she was also bullied outside. After all, the only man in the family had collapsed, so the villagers looked down on her and often made things difficult for her. At this time, one of her daughters failed to enter a university, so she sent her to work at the factory. As for the other, she was more promising and managed to enter a university. In the end, when she found the passbook at home, she found that the money in it had disappeared without a trace. With the passbook in hand, Xiang Yu went to Yun Yeho's sickbed and questioned him about the whereabouts of his money. Yun Yeho's mind at first. Later on, Xiang Yu threw a tantrum at home, smashing pots and bowls, which alarmed her 2 daughters. It was only then that Yun Yeho stuttered and explained that when Yun Yecheng's family was in dire straits a year or 2 ago, he had secretly given him a sum of money to tide him over when he went to the capital to visit his relatives. How could his wife let it go when she heard that? She began to pester him to ask Yun Yecheng for the money back. Yun Yeho refused. First, it was because he would lose face. The money had already been given out, so how could he ask for it back? Chapter 1648. She stomped her feet in anger. She cried, threw a tantrum, and threatened to hang herself, but her husband was adamant and did not care. In the end, her heart turned cold toward him. Honestly speaking, Yun Yeho's handling of this matter was indeed not perfect, so much so that Xiang Yu began to wonder if her husband was being too biased toward her brother's family, even though there was no fairness in this matter. Her husband was having a hard time, but did her family have it easy? At most, they would go bankrupt. But not only did she lose her source of income, but she also had to take care of a sick and disabled person. Now that their daughter was going to university, they had lost all their money. What was the meaning of this? Because of this, their younger daughter could not complete her university studies and had no choice but to work in a factory with their elder daughter. Because of this, she bore a grudge against them and even became sloppy when it came to taking care of her mother-in-law and husband. When Yun Yecheng found out about this when he went back to attend the funeral, he felt very apologetic and said that he wanted to compensate her with the money. Although the money was paid, the woman could not get rid of the hatred in her heart. Although she appeared polite on the surface, she did not buy it in her heart. What was the point of returning the money? Because of this, her daughter could not complete her university studies. This became her lifelong regret. One must know that having a university student in the family was a respectable thing. It was all ruined because of her husband's family. There was one more thing that he did not know. Sometimes, when she returned home late, it was not because she had just returned from the fields. Instead, it was because she had an affair with a bachelor next door behind his back, and the other party gave her a few hundred yuan for it. Everyone in the village knew that she was having an affair behind Yun Yeho's back, but he was kept in the dark. Hence, many people in the village secretly laughed at him. Everyone in the village laughed at Xiang Yu for being a loose woman. Anyway, her reputation had been spread out. They all said that she was a woman who did not abide by the virtues of a wife. When Yin Yeqing returned to his hometown this time, he also heard some gossip. He was furious and had many opinions about this woman. However, in order to avoid agitating him, he suppressed the urge to bring it up. Still, he did not have a good impression of this woman. His wife was the one who had shamelessly suggested this trip to the capital. Hence, he decided to find her a place to rent out once they reached the capital. He couldn't let Xiang Yu become Shusher's burden. At 4 in the afternoon, Yun Shusher and Mu Yaja arrived at the station early in the morning. Each of them drove a Mercedes-Benz SUV. Mu Yaja specially called for bodyguards to clear the road to prevent paparazzi from taking photos. They were all public figures. Naturally, they had to be on guard when they appeared in public. When the car arrived at the station, Yun Yeqing gave her a call. Yun Yeqing was stunned to see Mu Yaja, who was dressed in casual wear, standing in front of him, looking tall and slender. He then looked at Yun Shusher with suspicion in his eyes. "Shusher, isn't this your university professor?" Yun Shusher coughed and said, "Dad, let's go home first. There are too many people here, so it's not convenient to talk." All right. Yun Yeqing nodded and then turned to the wheelchair-bound Yun Yeho. "Ah ho, this is Shusher. Can you still recognize her when she grows up?" Chapter 1649. Yun Yeho stared at her for a long time before realization dawned on him. "Oh, my. Shusher. It's really you. I recognize you. He grabbed her hand and patted it as he lamented, "Shusher has grown up and is even prettier than when she was young. A girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood." Tears welled up in his eyes as he lamented. Xiang Yu and Yun Yeho's daughters, who were standing behind them, had ugly looks on their faces. However, they quickly suppressed their feelings of discomfort. Inwardly, Xiang Yu thought, "We're not his daughters, so why is he being so affectionate?" Yun Shusher glanced at her mother and her 2 daughters behind her before walking up to them with a smile. "This must be Auntie, right? Nice to meet you, Auntie." Xiang Yu smiled. Of course, she had to do it well. She said enthusiastically, "Oh, Shusher. It's you. Look, you've changed so much since you've grown up that Auntie couldn't recognize you." At the side, her eldest daughter, Yun Qingmiao, suddenly asked, "Eh? Sister Shusher looks different from when she was young." "I can't tell." Yun Qingmiao was 3 years older than Yun Shusher and had met her once when she was young. Her other daughter, Yun Qinli, said disapprovingly, "Sis, how many years has it been since you last saw Shusher? You must have forgotten how she looks like." Yun Shusher smiled and sweetly greeted, "Sister Qingmiao, Sister Qinli." The 2 sisters went forward and shook hands with her, but for some reason, Yun Qinli looked at her strangely. Yun Qinli didn't really like her. After all, if not for Yun Yeqing's matter, she would not have failed to attend university and become a laughingstock. Mu Yaja walked forward, but when he appeared in front of the sisters, he instantly attracted the attention of the mother-daughter trio. He was too dazzling. Even though he was wearing sunglasses and a low-key casual outfit, standing silently beside Yun Shusher, it was hard to ignore his powerful aura. His presence was too strong. Yun Qinli had only noticed Yun Shusher at first, but Yun Qingmiao, on the other hand, had been sneaking glances at him from the start. Oh God, this man is so handsome. He was dressed so fashionably. Looking at the leather jacket he was wearing, it was obvious that it was expensive. Everything he was wearing was branded, right? This man must be very rich or has a good family background, right? Could it be Yun Shusher's boyfriend? Xiang Yu also noticed him. She tugged on Yun Shishir's sleeve and secretly asked, this. Yun Shishir was once again put in a difficult position. At the side, Mu Yaja said expressionlessly, hello auntie, I am Shishir's husband. The sudden sound made Yun Shishir choke on her saliva. Cough. She snapped back to reality and glared at him unhappily. This man, how could he talk to himself? He had just proposed and had yet to register his marriage. How could he be considered her husband? Mu Yaja received her angry glare and smiled. What's wrong? Why are you so shy? Husband? Everyone exclaimed in unison in shock, but they all cast their gazes on them in disbelief. No one was more surprised than Yun Yecheng. This man, wasn't he her university professor? Why did he return to his hometown to visit his family for only a few months and become her future son-in-law? Yun Yeho's eyes widened as well. Chapter 1650. Yun Xingmiao pressed on. That's right. I haven't heard that you're married in our hometown, and there's no wedding banquet either. Have you guys registered your marriage? Yun Shishir was a little embarrassed as she answered, We haven't registered our marriage yet. Everyone's expression became even weirder when they heard that. Yun Yecheng, in particular, furrowed his brows and glared at his future son-in-law as if he were looking at a love rival. He was somewhat suspicious, afraid that the latter was a bad guy who had appeared out of nowhere to kidnap his daughter. His eyes were full of wariness as he sized him up. Mu Yaja also sensed the unfriendliness in his father's gaze. He turned to look at him and gave him a deep smile. On the other side, when Xiang Yu heard Yun Shishir's words, she was a little picky. How can you be considered my husband when you haven't registered your marriage? Yun Shishir was about to reply when Mu Yaja spoke first. Shishir is my wife. Whether we register our marriage or not doesn't mean anything. His domineering and firm attitude made Xiang Yu swallow her words with just one sentence. Suddenly, she sized up Mu Yaja again before her gaze finally landed on the branded watch on his wrist. He was dressed very low-key today, and this watch was probably the only thing on him that symbolized his status. Yun Xingmiao also saw the watch on Mu Yaja's wrist. Startled, she leaned close to her mother's ear and whispered, Mom, this man seems to be very rich. He's wearing a Vacheron Constantin watch. This watch costs at least a few 100,000 yuan, and the more expensive ones cost millions. Vacheron Constantin? Her mother was shocked and even more incredulous. She had never heard of this watch. Yun Xingmiao only knew about it because the boss of the factory she worked at wore this watch. She heard that it cost a few 100,000 yuan. It was so expensive that it cost millions. She had never seen it before, though. What watch? One for a few million? At this moment, the way she looked at Mu Yaja changed slightly. There was an unusual sizing up and satisfaction in her eyes. He. Why don't I know that Shishir has a boyfriend? Shishir, this is a major event in your life. Look at your father, he seems to be kept in the dark. Did you not tell him about it? If you ask me, before she could finish her words, Mu Yaja lost his patience and interrupted her. Shishir and I don't need you to worry about our marriage. I've already ordered people to pick an auspicious date. I'll give Shishir a perfect wedding. Once again, Xiang Yu's words were blocked. She had nothing else to say, and her expression was a little awkward. Yun Yeho, who was standing at the side, said, You talk too much, Xiang Yu. It's not up to you to worry about Shishir's boyfriend. She was embarrassed. Yun Yecheng kindly replied, Hey, don't say that. I'm just concerned about Shishir. Xiang Yu rolled her eyes inwardly. Care my ass. Who's asking you? Yun Xingmiao and Yun Qinli, who were standing at the side, looked at each other and kept quiet. Yun Qinli, in particular, felt even more indignant. I hate this Yun Shishir. If not for Yun Yecheng's family, she would have gone to university. Now that she did not go to university, she had no choice but to work in the factory with her elder sister. Working 12 hours a day, she only earned 2,000 to 3,000 yuan a month. What about Yun Shishir, though? How did she find such a handsome husband to be? He was tall and handsome, even more handsome than the popular male celebrities on TV. Most importantly, his family background seemed to be quite good. Chapter 1651. What was that saying again? Comparisons were odious indeed. Muyaja's phone rang all of a sudden. He walked to the side and picked up the call. On the other end, Minyu informed him that the board of directors had some complaints after he postponed the meeting in the afternoon. Muyaja snorted. Can't you handle this matter? Minyu wanted to cry. Why did he have to take over this mess? After a moment of silence, he cautiously asked, Boss, about tonight's dinner, I have something on. What is it? You're meddling too much. Minyu fell silent again. Then, Muyaja said, book a private room at West Tai Lake Restaurant tonight. I have a guest to entertain. Out of curiosity, Minyu asked, who is it? A certain man said seriously, my future father-in-law. Minyu, what's wrong? No. He snapped back to his senses. Okay, boss. I'll arrange it for you right away. Yun Qingmiao stole a few more glances at Muyaja's direction and secretly asked her younger sister, Sister, look at his phone. What brand is it? It looks like the one the boss uses. You're mistaken. The boss is using Apple's latest model, which costs a few thousand yuan. The one he's using seems to be of an inferior brand. Is that so? Then, I'm mistaken. I thought he's using Apple. Yun Qingmiao smiled. In their eyes, Apple phones were probably the most identifiable phones on the market. They were expensive and beautiful, and many people would spend months of their salary on them to make themselves look good. When they looked at Muyaja's phone again and saw no logo, they thought it was of an inferior brand. They were confused for a moment. This man is wearing such an expensive watch, so why is his phone of an inferior brand? It's too degrading. If Muyaja heard this, however, he would burst out laughing. This phone was a global limited edition custom-made by a technology company for high-end customers. Therefore, there was no logo on it, making it luxurious yet low-key. Yun Yeqing suddenly pulled Yun Shishir aside and asked in a hushed voice, Shishir, is what he said true? What? He's your boyfriend? Her father was perplexed. Didn't you tell Dad that he's your university professor? How did he become your boyfriend when Dad wasn't around? When did this happen? In fact, he was well aware of the man's identity. Yun Shishir had lied to him and said that he was a university professor. However, he had seen this man standing next to Yu at the hospital that time. Their facial features were so similar. How could she lie to him? Hence, he guessed that this man was from the Mu family. But the Mu family in the capital, however, he was from a wealthy family with such a high threshold. He was afraid that Shishir would be wronged if she were to be with this man. Dad. Yun Shishir did not know what he was worried about. She hugged his arm coquettishly. I'll explain this to you when we get back, okay? Yun Yeqing's expression softened as he nodded. All right. You're not young anymore, so it's understandable for you to find a partner. However, you must keep your eyes open when you're looking for a partner. If you're going to spend the rest of your life together, you must find someone you like and suitable. Okay. Okay. I'll follow your teachings. Yun Shishir said mischievously. Chapter 1652. Muyaja walked up to him and said, Uncle, Shishir and I have prepared a welcome banquet for your return to the capital. It's getting late, let's go. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Yun Yeqing politely declined. Muyaja smiled, but his tone was as domineering as ever. I'm all prepared. If you don't go, I'm afraid you'll be letting Shishir down. Yun Shishir chimed in, that's right, Dad. Uncle and Auntie will be here this time, along with my two sisters, so we must treat them well. Dad, just go. Yun Yeqing could not persuade her otherwise. Thus, Muyaja and Yun Shishir took his luggage and walked toward the car parked at the entrance. Yun Qingmiao had just reached the entrance when she saw two Mercedes-Benz cars parked there. One was a black Mercedes-Benz AMG, while the other was a white Mercedes-Benz AMG. Yun Xingmiao did not understand cars, but she could recognize the logo. Just the Mercedes-Benz logo alone was enough to shock her, and there were two of them. This time, she was certain that Yun Shishir's boyfriend was not simple. Jealousy grew in her heart. Yun Shishir busied herself with putting their luggage into the car. Yun Yecheng was trying to think of a way to carry his brother into the car when Mu Yaja stopped him. He bent over and, with a little force, easily carried his brother into the back seat of the car. This hormonal action made Yun Xingmiao and Yun Qinli blush and their hearts beat faster. Yun Shishir put the luggage in place, closed the trunk, and walked to the two sisters with a smile. Sister Qingmiao, Sister Qinli, get in the car. Yun Xingmiao frowned, feeling a little uncomfortable. She did not know why, but standing in front of Yun Shishir, she felt ashamed of her inferiority. Today, Yun Shishir was wearing a socialite blouse, slim-fit trousers, soft UGG boots, and a snow-white trendy jacket. She looked pure and charming. Just like her name, she was gentle and elegant. One look and one could tell that she was a lady from a prestigious family. She exuded an aristocratic aura from head to toe, which made Yun Shishir feel inexplicably inferior. She lowered her head and looked at herself. Her clothes had been washed until they were white, and her shoes were so worn that they could not be seen. Her hair was disheveled from the long train ride, and her skin was tanned and rough due to long-term exposure to the sun. There was an indescribable sadness and envy. Earlier, when Yun Shishir addressed her as Sister Qing Miao, it made her feel uncomfortable. Yun Shishir, that name. Poetic and artistic. She then looked at her name, Yun Xingmiao, which was uncouth and unpleasant to the ears. Why was the name Yun Yeho gave her so uncouth? When Yun Shishir saw her expression, she frowned suspiciously. What's wrong? Don't call me by my name. Why? Yun Shishir was baffled. Your name is so nice. It's so embarrassing that my name is so uncouth and unpleasant, retorted Yun Qingmiao. Yun Shishir smiled. No, I think Sister Qingmiao's name is very nice. He. Don't try to coax me. It's so embarrassing. I think that names are given by parents, so no matter what I'm called, I think it's nice. Yun Shishir gave him a serious look. Chapter 1653. He. Yun Yecheng's face was flushed red. When they got into the car, Yun Xingmiao pointed at Mu Yaja's car and asked, Shishir, can Qinli and I sit in this car? Sure. You can sit anywhere you want. Since both cars were spacious, it was not a problem for them to sit together. Yun Xingmiao and Yun Qinli, however, were unwilling to do so. They wanted to sit in Mu Yaja's car, so Yun Yeho, Yun Yecheng, and Xiang Yu sat in Yun Shishir's car. The two sisters, on the other hand, sat in Mu Yaja's car. The moment Yun Qinli got in, she was shocked by the spacious interior. Every detail of the Mercedes-Benz Gulsang, an imported SUV, was high-end. Leather seats, panoramic sunroof, and streamlined body, thus, when the sisters got into the car, they felt a little uneasy and restrained. Somehow, they felt that this car was too high-end and expensive. The car started moving slowly. Mu Yaja kept his eyes fixed on the front as he held the steering wheel and led the way. Yun Shishir's car followed behind. He drove a little slowly, seemingly taking into account that she was inexperienced in driving, so he did not drive too fast for fear that she would not be able to keep up with him. After getting used to it for a while, Yun Xingmiao finally relaxed her body. She leaned forward slightly and leaned on the back of the driver's seat. Through the rearview mirror, she silently sized up Mu Yaja's side profile. He had an arrogant lower jaw and flawless facial features. He was handsome and resolute, and his eyes exuded an incomparably noble and arrogant aura. She could not help feeling a little infatuated. She had never seen such a handsome man before, especially this man. Not only was he good-looking, but he also came from a wealthy family and was very charming. No woman could resist such extraordinary charm in front of him. She was no exception. Her heart was stirred. Thus, she asked with a grin, "What's your name?" Yun Qinli, who saw that her sister actually dared to strike up a conversation with this unapproachable man, was instantly interested and moved forward. Muyaja stared at him, but his voice was cold. "In the future, you can call me brother-in-law." "Brother-in-law?" Yun Qingmiao laughed dryly at that. "That's not very nice, is it? You're not even engaged yet, so it's not appropriate for me to call you brother-in-law now." Muyaja frowned slightly but did not say anything. "Tell me your name, I don't even know your name." Yun Qinli also chimed in, "That's right." Muyaja suddenly said, "Pay attention to your seats." Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli exchanged glances before turning to look at their seats curiously, not understanding what he meant. What do you mean?" "I don't understand." Muyaja said, "Seat belt." Yun Qingmiao grabbed the seatbelt, but she was still confused. "What's wrong with the seatbelt?" "Fasten it." Yun Qingmiao did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Why are you fastening the seatbelt?" Muyaja raised a brow impatiently and then turned the steering wheel abruptly, making a sharp turn. Caught off guard, the two sisters bumped into each other and nearly fell out of their seats. When the car returned to normal, the two sisters raised their heads in embarrassment and quickly fastened their seatbelts, not daring to say another word. This way, even if Yun Qingmiao wanted to talk to him, she could not do so due to the seatbelt. He did not like women other than Yun Shishir to be so close to him. Chapter 1654. The car continued its journey. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli whispered, "Shishir's boyfriend doesn't seem to be easy to get along with." "Humph. That can't be, right? I saw him standing beside Shishir just now, and his gaze was very gentle. Why is it that now? Look at him." Yun Qinli gestured at the man in the rearview mirror. He was looking straight ahead with an aloof expression and some lingering fear. Along the way, Muyaja did not speak or respond to them. Even when the two tried to strike up a conversation, he did not respond. "He gives off an unapproachable feeling." Yun Qinli suddenly whispered. "I think he must be a henpecked husband. A typical henpecked husband who only listens to his wife. Look at him, he's cold and indifferent when other women talk to him. It's obvious that he doesn't want to talk to us." "Is that so?" Yun Qingmiao clicked her tongue in a sarcastic manner. "Shoo." Yun Qinli pinched her in trepidation. "Can you keep your voice down?" "Oh. It's fine." Yun Qingmiao continued to size him up through the rearview mirror in a daze after saying that. All of a sudden, she muttered indignantly, "Sigh. Comparisons are odious. Why didn't I meet such a good man? Why does she have to encounter so many good things? If I had such a boyfriend, I'd be overjoyed." Yun Qinli said unhappily, "I really don't know what kind of fate she has. I don't think she's that good. She doesn't deserve this man. Really. Maybe he's just playing with her and it won't work out in the end." She lowered her voice, thinking that Muyaja could not hear her. Unexpectedly, Muyaja's hearing was so amazing that he heard their whispers loud and clear. Impatient, he reached out to change the air conditioner's gear and blew the cold air into the back seat. He was cold resistant, and since he had turned off the air conditioner vent in the driver's seat, he could not feel the cold air. The back seat was not so comfortable, though. Cold air was coming out of the room, blowing. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli only realized later that the car was a little cold. They hugged their bodies and shivered. "It's so cold, why is it so cold in the car?" she asked gloomily. Yun Qinli also knew that she was shivering. She said with a strange expression, "That's strange. Why did the car suddenly become cold?" After a pause, she discussed with Muyaja, "Why don't we turn on the heater? It's too cold." However, Muyaja said, "The heater is broken." Yun Qinli, "How could it be broken? Oh my god." Thus, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli kept blowing cold air all the way. Minyu had arranged for him to stay at Wenbi Villa Hotel. When they got out of the car at the hotel, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were hugging each other's shoulders. They were clearly freezing. After a certain two-faced man got out of the car, he swept them a glance before gracefully slamming the car door and walking toward Yun Shishir's car. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli looked at his back view. They opened their mouths, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Xiang Yu walked up to them and touched Yun Qingmiao's hand, which was cold to the touch, which gave her a shock. "Why are your hands so cold?" Yun Qingmiao said aggrievedly, "The heater in the car is broken, and we've been freezing the whole way." Shielding her daughter, Xiang Yu said angrily, "What lousy car is this? How can the heater be broken?" Chapter 1655. Yun Qinli was a little puzzled. Earlier, she seemed to have seen the air conditioning on the dashboard display. Did he turn it on purpose? She had her suspicions. Mu Yaja had originally booked the Westlake Thai restaurant, which was located in the one by Villa Hotel. It was considered a high-end restaurant. Although it could only be considered high-end, the dishes in the restaurant were sumptuous and delicious. After stabilizing the car, Yun Shishir helped Yun Yeqing out of the car. As for Yun Yeho, he was naturally carried out of the car by Mu Yaja, who then pushed his wheelchair into the hotel. At first, Yun Yeho was a little restless and politely declined the offer. From their first meeting, he could tell that this man was of noble status. He was either rich or powerful, so he felt somewhat flattered to have him push his wheelchair. Mu Yaja, however, simply said, "You're not in good health, so just sit still. You don't have to worry about anything else." Hearing this, Yun Yeho did not say anything else. His flushed face showed that he was in a good mood. Yun Shishir snickered when she saw this. This fellow is quite good at doing things. Inside the hotel, the restaurant manager naturally did not dare to delay the arrival of a distinguished guest. He led the waiters to line up at the entrance to welcome him. The lobby manager could not hide his joy and excitement when he saw Mu Yaja. He immediately went up to him and was about to greet him when Mu Yaja stopped him in time. "Don't make a fuss. I'm just here for a meal." In other words, he hoped that the man would keep a low profile and not address him as Chairman Mu, lest he was bluffing. The lobby manager kept quiet when he heard this. Naturally, he understood the underlying meaning of his words and nodded with a smile. "Chairman Mu, the private room is ready for you. This way, please." Even though he was told to keep a low profile, he still had to address him as Chairman Mu. Otherwise, it would be breaking the rules. He gave the waiter beside him a look, and the latter immediately stepped forward to help Mu Yaja push the wheelchair into the elevator. The elevator in the hotel was not big, so when Yun Shishir stepped inside, it was already overloaded. Seeing this, Yun Qingmiao giggled. "Shishir, why don't you walk up? It's only the 5th floor anyway." Yun Shishir nodded. "All right. Then I'll walk up. You guys enter the private room first." Just as the elevator doors were about to close, Mu Yaja suddenly stepped out. Yun Shishir was stunned. "What are you doing?" Behind him, Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli were puzzled. Why are you going out? There's still room for one more." Mu Yaja ignored the people behind him. He lowered his head and glanced at Yun Shishir. He reached out, took her hand, and interlocked his fingers with hers. "I'll go with you." Yun Shishir blushed and said in a low voice, "Why didn't I realize you were so clingy?" Behind them, Yun Qingmiao's expression changed. She wanted to say something, but the elevator doors had already closed. In the narrow space, Yun Qingmiao was obviously in a bad mood. Her mother glanced at her and chided, "What's wrong with that long face?" "Nothing." Yun Qinli suddenly asked Yun Yeqing out of curiosity, "Uncle, what's the background of Shishir's boyfriend? I saw the lobby manager treating him very politely just now. It's as if he's very powerful, calling him Chairman Mu in a very flattering manner." Chapter 1656. Yun Yeqing let out a dry chuckle but did not reply. His mother, however, interjected from the side. "Brother Cheng, since he's Shishir's boyfriend, I think you should really find out more about him. Shishir is so young and pretty. If she gets abducted by some unknown rascal, you'll have a lot to cry about." "That's right. Uncle, you should find out more about him." Yun Qingmiao chimed in from the side. Yun Yeho, who was in his wheelchair, clicked his tongue and reprimanded, "Why are you poking your nose into other people's business? He's Shishi's boyfriend. Why are you all so concerned about him?" You. Yun Yeho. What's wrong with you today? Why are you always pouring cold water on me? His wife retorted in dissatisfaction, unwilling to be outdone. Yun Yecheng tried to smooth things over. "Oh, dear. Today is a rare happy day, let's not bicker." Yun Yeho kept quiet when he heard that. His wife snorted and muttered something under her breath. Her voice was so low that no one could hear what she was saying. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishi soon arrived at the private room. However, before the two could take their seats, Yun Qingmiao asked Mu Yaja curiously, "I heard them calling you Chairman Mu earlier. He. Are you a big boss?" Yun Shishi furrowed her brows in discomfort. Why is this woman paying so much attention to Mu Yaja right from the start? She cast a sidelong glance at a certain man, but her brows relaxed. It was not surprising, though. After all, this man was a magnet for bees and butterflies. Putting aside his handsome looks and impressive family background, just his noble aura alone was enough to move one's heart. He was indeed not someone to be worry-free. Mu Yaja looked up at Yun Qingmiao. Initially, he wanted to ignore her, but with so many pairs of eyes watching, he could not appear too cold. Hence, with a smile, he said casually, "Everyone in this hotel calls me boss." Yun Qingmiao had a feeling that he was hiding something. Just as she was about to question him, Xiang Yu beat her to it. "I heard the lobby manager calling you Chairman Mu earlier." He. "I still don't know your name, so can I call you Xiao Mu?" Mu Yaja nodded. Xiang Yu smiled in satisfaction. Yun Shishi, on the other hand, snickered. Xiao Mu? This title really made one not know whether to laugh or cry. If all of Dixing's subordinates knew that their boss outside, they would be in the wind. Yun Yeho quietly sized him up and exclaimed in admiration, "Xiao Mu, you're really tall and handsome. Plus, you're very polite too." Xiang Yu added, "That's right. To be able to find someone like Xiao Mu, there must be smoke rising from your ancestors' graves." Yun Shishi frowned. Her aunt's words were inappropriate and should not be said in front of so many people. However, after thinking about it, she did not pursue the matter. She heard that this auntie had not studied for many years and was not particular about her speech, so she could only let it pass. Yun Yecheng, on the other hand, remained silent. From the moment Mu Yaja entered the room, he had been sizing him up without a word, as if he were facing a formidable enemy. Today, when he returned to the capital, he did not expect that a prospective son-in-law would appear out of nowhere. This caught him a little off guard. Thus, he had yet to digest it until now. Chapter 1657. As they exchanged pleasantries, the dishes were served one by one. Everyone chatted as they ate. For some reason, though, Yun Shishi had a feeling that the topic at the table revolved around Mu Yaja. Even though Mu Yaja was unwilling to pay attention to it, he still maintained a courteous look on his face. She asked, "Little Mu, how old are you this year?" Mu Yaja answered, 28. She exclaimed, "Oh, dear. I really couldn't tell at all. I thought that you're only 22 years old today. That means that you've already had some aspirations of entering society." Mu Yaja answered, "I started working when I was 20. She lamented, "Does that mean that you didn't make it to university?" Yun Qingli replied, "Sigh. I didn't go to university, either. I got in, but I couldn't afford the tuition fees, so it was delayed." As she spoke, she did not forget to secretly shoot a resentful glance at her father and Yun Shishi. Yun Shishi, who was busy taking care of her father, did not notice her sister's gaze. Mu Yaja answered, "I did go to university, but I finished all my studies when I was 19. Her eyes widened in shock. "Which university are you from?" Mu Yaja answered, "Stanford." Her eyes widened. "Why are you tearing up the blanket?" Muyaja patiently answered, Stanford. She frowned. I've never heard of that university. Yun Qinli, who was standing at the side, felt a little embarrassed and quickly tried to smooth things over. Mom, he's talking about Stanford, a very famous university in America. Stanford. Oh. I see. She rubbed her hands together uneasily, clearly feeling a little embarrassed. Yun Yeho suddenly said, Sure, you should be 23 years old today, right? Yun Sure looked up and smiled. Uncle, you must have remembered wrongly. I'm 24 this year. 24? Yun Yeho slapped his forehead. Oh, dear. I remembered your birthday wrongly. At the side, Yun Yeching said, Have you forgotten? When you came over, Sure hadn't even gone to college yet. Yun Yeho said, So, Sure, you're a year older than Qinli. Qinli should call you big sister. Yun Qinli was surprised. Sure, you're older than me by a year. Aya, what a blunder. Sister Sure, I'll have to call you sister from now on. Soon, the topic was back on track. Alas, the two sisters still paid more attention to Muyaja. From time to time, they would ask questions such as, Do you have a house in the capital? Do you have siblings? And, what are your parents' jobs? Muyaja answered them one by one. However, he didn't answer in detail. Yun Xingmiao, on the other hand, was calculating in her heart. Good family background, a house in the capital, a stable job, and a high income. He's a pretty good man. Who knows, he might even be a novice. After all, the watch on his wrist can't be fake. His family must be very rich to be able to afford a 1,000,000 yuan watch. Yun Xingmiao took another look at Yun Sure and secretly sized her up. It was no wonder she could find such a good man. She's good-looking, sweet, and knows how to coax people. Such a personality is the most pleasing to men. Yun Sure could only feel her sister's piercing gaze on her, which made her feel a little uncomfortable for a moment. He was also secretly calculating in his heart. It seemed that he had to arrange another place for them to stay. Chapter 1658. It was better not to bring relatives over for the time being. They would start gossiping again if they saw the two children at home. She could not be bothered to deal with them. She was not afraid of getting pregnant out of wedlock, rather, she was afraid that this auntie and her two sisters would say something hurtful in front of the children. Even if it was unintentional, she would not allow it. Hence, after dinner, Yun Sure decided to arrange for them to stay in a hotel for a few nights. She would make proper arrangements for them once she found another place to stay. Driving to the hotel, she arranged 2 rooms for her mother, Yun Qingmiao, and Yun Sure. The latter asked curiously, Why are we staying in a hotel? He. Mom, the housing prices in the capital are so expensive. Sister Sure's house is small and can't accommodate so many people, so she arranged for us to stay in a hotel first, said Yun Qinli. Her mother smiled at that. If you ask me, the capital isn't as comfortable as our hometown. There are so many rooms back home, it's the same for all of us. The housing prices in the city are indeed frighteningly expensive. Yun Sure could only say, Auntie, Sister Qingmiao, and Qinli, let's just make do for tonight. I happen to be free tomorrow, so I'll bring you guys to look at the houses and arrange for your accommodations before making other arrangements. Her mother nodded but suddenly asked, How much does a night in a hotel cost? I don't have much money on me. She had a bankbook with her, and it contained tens of thousands of yuan that her father had returned to her. She could not bear to spend it, so she deliberately said that. Yun Sure said politely, I've already paid for your rooms, so you guys can stay here without worries. Okay. After leading them to their respective rooms, Yun Sure was finally able to leave. She then drove the two back to Shangdi Walk. Along the way, Yun Yeho dozed off in the back seat. He was indeed tired from the long journey. Yun Yecheng, on the other hand, was not sleepy. Taking advantage of his brother's nap, he sat in the front passenger seat and suddenly turned to ask, Sure, how far have you gone with him? Dad, what do you mean by that? Have you slept with him? Yun Yicheng paused for a moment before asking bluntly, did you sleep together? Yun Shishir blushed. After a moment of silence, she nodded awkwardly. Yun Yicheng's face turned ashen when he heard that, but he could not bear to reprimand her. Instead, he sternly said, Shishir, it's not that Dad wants to chide you. You're too muddle-headed. You haven't gotten married and you haven't even gotten your marriage certificate. It's not right for you to be living together. Dad, it's not that Dad doesn't know some things. He's just pretending not to know. I know very well who that man is. Yun Yicheng suddenly said in a deep voice, his eyes full of meaning. Yun Shishir looked at him. Dad, what do you mean? Yun Yicheng did not intend to hide it from her and went straight to the point. He's Yu Yu's biological father, isn't he? How did you know? Yun Shishir turned pale with fright. Yun Yicheng did not know whether to laugh or cry as he asked, do you really think that Dad's eyesight is bad because of his old age? Who would believe that he's not Yu Yu's father when he's standing next to him? Yun Shishir was speechless. How could she have neglected this point? In fact, Mu Yaja and Yu Yu did resemble each other, but, sigh. Chapter 1659. Shishir, you're not young anymore. There are some things that I shouldn't say to you anymore. You should know better. If you two have already registered your marriage, I won't interfere with your marriage. Who knows if he's sincere to you, though? In today's society, a man's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. You may think that he's sincere to you, but it's hard to tell. Who knows if he'll be the one you'll end up spending the rest of your life with? Her father's words were well-intentioned and persuasive, but each of them was like a gem. Yun Shishir bit her lower lip as she stared ahead with her hands on the steering wheel. It was not unreasonable for him to say that. She could empathize with his concerns. As a father, it was understandable for him to be worried that his daughter would be cheated by an outsider. It was just that he did not know Mu Yaja well, so it was understandable for him to have such worries. He said, after registering your marriage, I won't be able to control what happens between the two of you. However, before you register your marriage, you have to be mindful of your chastity, so you're not allowed to live with him until then. Do you understand? Yun Shishir nodded her head. Also, I have a question that I want to ask you personally. Answer me honestly. Yun Shishir replied, go ahead, Dad. Do you really like that man? Or is it because you've given birth to his child that you're willing to make do with him? If it were the latter, he might not agree to it. A marriage made for the sake of a child would not be a happy one. He wanted her to be happy and healthy. That was enough for him. He did not ask for riches or fame. All he wanted was for her to be able to choose the man she loved and spend the rest of her life in bliss. At the traffic light junction, she stepped on the brakes and turned to look at him seriously before nodding her head solemnly. The car stopped in the garage. As Mu Yaja walked over, he could feel Yun Yicheng's vigilant gaze on his back, which was like a prick. He turned to look at Yun Yicheng, only to see the latter regain his composure in an instant. Mu Yaja didn't think too much about it and carried Yun Yeho to the wheelchair. At the side, Yun Yicheng reminded her repeatedly, be careful, Mu Yaja said, don't worry, I can handle it. Yun Yicheng nodded, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. When they entered the house, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen heard the commotion and rushed to the door enthusiastically, only to be stunned when they saw Yun Yicheng and Yun Yeho, whom they had never met before. Grandfather, who is this? Yu Yu asked in surprise. Yun Yicheng was equally surprised to see another tall child standing beside Yu Yu. This child looked similar to Yu Yu. He stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly reacted. Back when Shishir was a surrogate mother for the Muse, she was pregnant with twins. However, 7 years ago, Yu Yu stopped breathing when she was born. The Muse came and took away the other child, leaving behind the missing Yu Yu. This child was probably the other healthy child. Xiao Yichen looked at Yu Yu, then at Yun Yicheng, and finally at Yun Yeho in the wheelchair. Chapter 1660. Xiao Yichen was also quick-witted and had a sweet tongue. Hence, he followed Yu Yu and enthusiastically called him a grandpa. This greeting almost melted Yun Yecheng's heart. He squatted down in front of him and hugged him. Little guy, what's your name? Xiao Yichen was not at all afraid of strangers. His lips curled into a confident smile. My name is Mu Yichen. Grandpa, you can call me Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen. You're so obedient. So obedient. Yun Yecheng lovingly caressed his tender face, but his heart was filled with emotions. 7 years ago, he had brushed shoulders with this child. Back then, when the child came out of the delivery room, he was wrapped in swaddling clothes and wailing loudly. The Mu family was very strict in protecting him, with bodyguards in black leading the way. At the entrance of the delivery room, there were nurses from the Mu group's private hospital waiting to take the child away. As he passed by, he caught a glimpse of the child's wrinkled and red face and his tender little hands waving about in the swaddling clothes. At that time, he had the urge to snatch the child away from them, but he knew that such an outcome would be terrible. Hence, he restrained his impulse. Other than that one time, they had not seen each other for 7 years. Yun Yecheng could not help but size him up seriously. His small face was fair and translucent, as if it was carved out of jade. It was especially adorable, pure, and charming. His eyes were similar to Yun Shishir's, but his silhouette resembled his father's handsomeness. For a moment, Yun Yecheng was touched. He could not help but hug the child's shoulders and caress him over and over again. Yun Yeho, on the other hand, felt incredulous when he saw this. Who were these two little guys? Their eyes were very similar to Yun Shishir's. However, thinking about it, he felt that something was amiss. Yun Shishir was only 24 years old and unmarried. Where did these children come from? Yun Yeho looked at the two children and then at Yun Shishir, but out of courtesy, he did not ask any questions. Yun Shishir moved the luggage into the cloakroom and began to get busy. Mu Yaja was carrying his luggage through the door when he saw this scene. He was stunned for a moment before he said in a deep voice, Xiao Yichen, come over and help. Seeing this, Yun Yecheng shielded the child and immediately said, I'll do it. Let me do it. The luggage is too heavy for a child to carry. Xiao Yichen stopped him out of filial piety. No need. Grandpa, let me do it. You might not be as strong as me. As he spoke, he ran briskly in front of Mu Yaja, picked up a bag in each hand, and sprinted towards the cloakroom. Leaving behind a horrified Yun Yecheng, this child, divine power. So strong? This package weighed at least 20 pounds, maybe even 30 pounds. Yet, this child was carrying one in each hand. This was too heaven-defying. Yun Yecheng was truly shocked. Mu Yaja looked at Yu again. The latter's expression froze before he pretended to hold his stomach and said, Daddy, my stomach hurts. With that, he pretended to hold his stomach and went to his room to slack off. Mu Yaja, this rascal. Can't he find a decent excuse to slack off? After the luggage was settled, Yun Yecheng pushed Yun Yeho into the room. As soon as they entered the room, Yun Yeho hurriedly asked about the two children. Chapter 1661. Yun Yecheng did not hide anything from him and recounted in detail how, 7 years ago, the Yun family was facing bankruptcy and was burdened with debt. She had done such a foolish thing for the sake of the Yun family. Yun Yeho was so touched that he could not speak a word. He did not expect Yun Shishir to do so much for the Yun family, though. In his heart, he had a very good impression of this child. On the other side, Mu Yaja was about to go to bed when Yun Shishir stopped him at the door and said, You can't stay here tonight. What's wrong? Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. Are you chasing me away? Yun Shishir blushed and explained, I don't mean to chase you away. Don't misunderstand. Then, what do you mean by not staying here tonight? Mu Yaja sized her up and asked in a deep voice, Woman, are you thinking of rebelling? Yun Shishir lowered her head and hesitated for a while before she stammered, My dad just said, we haven't registered our marriage yet, so it's not official yet, so, it's inevitable that people will gossip about us if we stay together before we get married. Why don't you go back first? Muyaja snorted, but his tone revealed his dissatisfaction and domineering. Who dares to gossip about you? Whoever dares to gossip can come forward and try. Yun Shishir glared at him. All right. It's late now, you should go back and rest early. I'll wash up and get ready to rest, too. Muyaja furrowed his brows, his eyes showing his displeasure. This is my house. He added, I've already proposed. Could it be that this was not official enough? Yun Shishir explained, but a proposal doesn't mean marriage. We haven't registered our marriage yet, so we're not husband and wife. It's fine if my dad isn't around, but now that he's home, he'll definitely be afraid of me being gossiped about if he sees us sleeping in the same room. He's old, so his thinking must be a little old-fashioned, but it's for our own good. Muyaja, he held onto the door frame to block the door and questioned her. It's so late now, where do you want me to stay? That's true. Although he had a lot of properties under his name, he had been living here most of the time. He rarely returned to the Mu family. Mu Xing's health was not good, so he would visit him occasionally, but he rarely stayed at home. The other houses were cold and cheerless. There was no hot water or electricity, let alone a change of clothes. She actually wanted to chase him away. She pointed to the ceiling all of a sudden. Why don't you go to the second floor tonight? Muyaja's brows sank as he spat out a few words through gritted teeth. Yun, sure. I don't care. With that, she gave him a shove and locked the door with a bang. She D*****. It looked like this silly woman was really determined to keep him at the door. Muyaja's face was filled with displeasure when the two little lads mocked him from behind. You, oh, daddy, so pitiful. Xiao Chen, so pitiful. The man's face turned green. He turned around abruptly and saw Yu and Xiao Chen standing together in the corridor. They had the tacit understanding to cover their mouths with their hands and secretly mock him. Yu, tisk, tsk. It's so pitiful no matter how I look at it. Chapter 1662. Yu, poor daddy, you're exiled just like that. Xiao Chen, exiled just like that. Yu, how does it feel to be exiled to the borders? Xiao Chen, how does it feel? Yu, does it feel sad and wronged? Xiao Chen, does it feel wronged? Yu, he. Serves you right. Xiao Chen, he. Serves you right. The two little rascals sang the same tune and mocked him mercilessly. Muyaja's face fell instantly. Are you tired of living? Muyaja clenched his fists, making a few strange sounds. Or are you saying that you're so capable that you dare to make sarcastic remarks about daddy? Xiao Chen was afraid of his expression and gulped nervously. He recalled the suffering he had suffered at the hands of Muyaja in the past. Thus, he admitted defeat and hid behind Yu in fear. However, Yu didn't fall for this trick. She wasn't afraid of his threats and wasn't afraid of his expression at all. Since she had her mommy's support, she put her hands on her hips and looked at him smugly. Daddy, it's very tasteless of you to threaten two 7-year-old children. Muyaja, this sharp-tongued little rascal, was unmoved by force or persuasion. He narrowed his eyes and said, Go back to your room and sleep. Daddy, why are you so fierce? Yu covered her mouth and snickered. She said mercilessly, Hey, look, I was being kind and wanted to say that if you don't know how to make a blanket, I could be kind and help you make a blanket. But you're so fierce, I'm not going to help you. After she finished speaking, Yu held Xiao Chen's hand and swaggered back to their room. She closed the door with a bang. Muyaja clenched his fists. This kid, his ability to hit someone when they are down was not small. There was a master bedroom on the second floor. However, there was no blanket, only a mattress. Muyaja had no choice but to fend for himself. He rummaged through the cabinets and took out sheets, blankets, and a set of silk quilts. After tidying them up, he went to the bathroom, took a hot bath, and went to sleep. There's a phrase called sleepless nights. These words were vividly reflected. Throughout the night, a certain man tossed and turned, but still could not fall asleep. In the dark room, the man opened his eyes that were as cold as the moon and stared at the ceiling, but he felt inexplicably irritated. Perhaps it was because he was used to having her by his side during the long nights. Without her by his side, it was easy for him to lose sleep. During the 2 weeks that she was on set, whenever he couldn't sleep, he would get up, smoke a few cigarettes, read a few emails, and go through a few reports. He would only feel sleepy when he lay in bed at dawn. And last night, with her by his side, he slept exceptionally peacefully. Then, what about her? Would she get used to not having him by her side? Or would she fall asleep peacefully as usual? He stretched out his arms a little dejectedly, propped himself up, and laid on his side. Yun Shusher's hazy sleeping face seemed to be reflected in his eyes. He couldn't help but reach out to touch it, but it instantly disappeared into thin air. He rubbed his forehead in frustration, feeling extremely frustrated. The next morning, Yun Shusher had just finished washing up. When she walked out of the bedroom, she saw Mu Yaja sitting in the living room, smoking a cigarette and flipping through the newspaper. He leaned against the sofa lazily. His neat black hair was slightly messed up by the morning breeze outside the window, covering his pair of deep eyes. As a result, she couldn't see his expression clearly. She was stunned. "You're up so early?" When Mu Yaja heard her, he raised his head, put down the newspaper, and walked towards her. Chapter 1663. His first sentence was filled with an unquestionable power. Yun Shusher had just woken up, but faced with his words, she was a little confused. In a daze, she replied instinctively, "In the drawer of the TV cabinet in the bedroom." "Why?" Mu Yaja walked around her and went straight into the room. Yun Shusher was even more confused as she followed him into the room. However, she saw Mu Yaja squatting in front of the TV cabinet, pulling open the drawer and rummaging through the cabinets. Finally, he found her household register among a stack of documents. "What do you want to do with my household register?" Yun Shusher furrowed her brows as she stared at his cold and deep face. She was a little guarded, but after racking her brains, she still couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. Mu Yaja ignored her words and flipped open the household register until he reached her page. Then, he grabbed the household register in his hands and suddenly stood up. He was so tall and straight that it made the room seem small and narrow in an instant. Yun Shusher saw him holding the household register tightly and was even more puzzled. She couldn't figure out what he was trying to do so mysteriously early in the morning. However, she saw him walk in front of her and get close to her. He lowered his head and asked, "Where is your identity card?" It's in my wallet." Yun Shusher didn't understand, but she still answered obediently. "Where is your wallet?" Yun Shusher blinked. In the glove compartment of the car." Mu Yaja suddenly grabbed her and walked out of the door in big strides. Yun Shusher struggled for a while and asked with furrowed brows, "Mu Yaja, you're being so mysterious early in the morning. I can't figure out what you're trying to do." "Follow me." Yun Shusher was stunned and asked in confusion, "Follow you where?" He turned his head abruptly and stared into her eyes as he enunciated each word clearly. "I propose to you, HM." Yun Shusher nodded her head belatedly. "Yeah, you promised me." "N?" Mu Yaja said again, but his handsome eyes flashed with a touch of light. Yun Shusher pursed her lips, but there was a hint of shyness on her face. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, "Why are you asking this? I don't understand the meaning behind your words. Answer me first." Mu Yaja paused. His tone was so strong that no one dared to defy him. "You promised me, Yes. Yes." Yun Shusher was stunned. She felt that the man standing in front of her seemed to be possessed early in the morning. When she woke up, she saw him sitting on the sofa, flipping through the newspaper. She saw that he looked a little tired, but she couldn't figure out when he had slept last night. Hearing this, Mu Yaja suddenly gave a deep smile and raised his brow elegantly, forming a beautiful crease between his brows. "Then follow me." With that said, He held her hand and was about to walk out of the door. His strides were extremely long, and he walked with his head held high, as if he couldn't wait to do something. Yun Shishir found it difficult to keep up with him. She stumbled and staggered a few steps. She said in annoyance, "What exactly is it?" "To the Civil Affairs Bureau." These 4 short words made Yun Shishir completely confused. What? Civil Affairs Bureau? Perhaps his decision came too suddenly, so she was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, she asked a question very foolishly: "Why are we going to the Civil Affairs Bureau?" Chapter 1664. Her question was simply too silly. Muyaja lost his cool at once. With a playful look in his eyes, he could not help but ask, "Register our marriage?" What else could they do at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Yun Shishir gaped in shock. This was such a sudden decision that she was completely unprepared. Hence, when Muyaja said the words "register our marriage," she was left with nothing but shock and confusion. She wasn't ready yet. It was so sudden, she was completely unprepared for it. "What's wrong?" Muyaja saw her hesitant look and narrowed his handsome eyes slightly in displeasure. "You're not willing?" Yun Shishir immediately replied, "No. I'm not unwilling." "Then, why do you have such an expression?" Yun Shishir answered truthfully, "I'm not ready." She suddenly thought of something and asked quizzically, "Have you checked the almanac?" "The almanac?" Muyaja raised a brow. Yun Shishir smiled. "You might not know common sense. Although we're only registering our marriage and not holding an official wedding, we still have to check the almanac to register our marriage. If it says that today isn't a good day to get married, then it means that it's not a good day to register our marriage." Muyaja, however, curled his lips. "I've already checked it." Yun Shishir was even more dumbfounded. He knows how to check the almanac? Yun Shishir suddenly looked at the newspaper on the low table in the living room and suddenly realized why he was sitting on the sofa and flipping through the newspaper early in the morning. So this man had already prepared everything. Muyaja waved the household register in his hand and smiled. "Come with me." Not allowing her to refuse, he held her hand and walked out of the door. After Yun Yecheng got out of bed, he first helped his younger brother wash up. When he walked into the living room, he saw Yu reading the newspaper on the sofa. His head was bent as he flipped through the pages, but when he reached the corner of a page, his lips suddenly curled into a smile. Yun Yecheng asked, "Yu, is your mommy awake yet?" Yu lowered her head and flipped through the newspaper. Then, she looked up and smiled brightly. "It's time to go out." He asked curiously, "Where did you go?" Yu thought for a moment and smiled. He probably went to the Civil Affairs Bureau. He closed the newspaper. The moment the wind blew in from outside the window, it lifted a corner of the newspaper. On the page of the almanac, it showed, "Marriage." Muyaja drove to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Along the way, Yun Shishir still had a mysterious and subtle feeling. In fact, it was a little unbelievable. Therefore, when the two of them arrived at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau and got out of the car, their heads felt heavy and their feet felt light. They were still in a daze. She had an inexplicable feeling. She felt as if she was a duck that had been forced onto a perch and was at the mercy of others. She was inexplicably dragged to the Civil Affairs Bureau, clearly with a bit of coercion. Although the marriage partner standing next to her was handsome and had a prominent family background, and just 2 days ago, he had proposed to her, and she had gladly accepted. If it were any other woman, she would be so happy that she would be on cloud 9. However, perhaps it was because he was too sudden and overbearing that she felt as if she was being coerced. She did not know where this impulse of his came from, but it was like a whirlwind that caught her off guard. Could she regret it? Yun Shishir thought with tears streaming down her face. Chapter 1665. It wasn't that Yun Shishir wasn't looking forward to the marriage, it was just that it was too rushed and it made her feel unreal. When they were queuing up to register, Yun Shishir only felt that there was a dark cloud above her head. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled from time to time. The strong wind blew and messed her up. She sat on the chair as if her soul had left her body and she didn't look human at all. Her dispirited state was a stark contrast to the group of happy young couples around her. Muyaja sat beside her and quietly flipped through a financial magazine. His handsome side profile attracted countless envious gazes. It was just that. Everyone glanced at the woman beside him with tears on her face, and their hearts broke out in cold sweat. Was this a forced marriage? No matter how they looked at it, she didn't look like someone who was here to register their marriage willingly. But if it was a forced marriage, from their point of view, it was more reasonable for the man to be the one being forced into the marriage. They couldn't help but be puzzled. Today was probably a good day as there seemed to be a lot of people who came to register their marriage at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Yin Shishir was wearing sunglasses and was fully armed to avoid the inquisitive gazes of the crowd. Perhaps it was because most of the young people who came to register their marriage were immersed in joy, hence they didn't notice the subtle atmosphere between Yin Shishir and Muyaja. She was in a daze when she suddenly heard some movement beside her. Turning her head, she saw Muyaja slowly getting up. She looked at him suspiciously, not knowing what he was going to do. Could it be that he was going back on his word? Or could it be that he also realized that marriage was such a solemn matter and shouldn't be decided so hastily on a whim? Muyaja glanced at her and said plainly, "The ID card is in the car. I'll go get it. Wait for me here." Her hopes were dashed. Yin Shishir nodded woodenly. After he walked away, a woman beside her curiously leaned over and asked excitedly, "He's your man?" "Guess." Yin Shishir wore her sunglasses and gave an ambiguous answer. "You should be here to register your marriage." When Yin Shishir heard this, the corners of her mouth turned down and she didn't seem to be happy about registering their marriage. The woman exclaimed, "Eh? I see that you and that handsome guy are both very young. It seems like you're here to get your marriage certificate. But looking at your expression, it seems like you're here to register a divorce." Yin Shishir was speechless. The reason why the woman said that was probably because she looked like a resentful woman who had been abandoned. The woman's eyes lit up. "However, your man is really handsome. At first glance, I thought it was a movie star." "Io, you're even more handsome than movie stars." The man sitting next to the woman was a little unhappy. Hey, your husband is sitting next to you. How dare you praise another man in front of me?" The woman immediately hugged his arm coquettishly. "Hee, of course you're the most handsome in my heart." The two people in front of her were flirting with each other happily. Yin Shishir was caught off guard and was fed a mouthful of dog food. The correct way to get a marriage certificate should be like this. But just now, Muyaja had been sitting next to her without saying a word. His eyes were like torches as he stared at the service counter with a serious expression. He didn't have the sweetness of a young couple registering their marriage at all. The more she thought about it, the more bitter Yin Shishir felt. She lowered her head silently. Chapter 1666. Yin Shishir looked up and tried to smile. "He's the one who's about to enter the marriage grave with me." The woman was speechless. She mumbled, "Why do you make such a happy thing sound so tragic? How can it not be tragic? If she was bullied by him in the future, it would be perfectly justifiable. That man is marrying you. You've made a fortune. Isn't there a saying that marriage is the grave of love? Then do you know what it's called if you're not married?" Yin Shishir asked curiously, "What?" "If you're not married, it's called abandoning your corpse in the wilderness." Yin Shishir was amused by her. "You mean, I have to be grateful?" The woman smiled and was about to say something when her gaze suddenly turned behind him. She looked up slightly in surprise. Yin Shishir felt a chill run down her spine. She turned her head woodenly and saw Muyaja standing behind her. He was sizing her up coldly. "Did you have a good chat?" Muyaja sat down beside her and raised his eyebrows. Yin Shishir couldn't help but shiver. It was all right. She didn't say anything bad about him, did she? Here's the main point. Muyaja stared at her and asked unkindly, Do you think that marrying me is the same as entering the grave? Yun Shusher shook her head. The woman reached out her hand to him in a friendly manner and interrupted them. She said happily, "Hello. This handsome guy." Mu Yaja looked coldly at her outstretched hand. He looked down indifferently and said indifferently, "Do we know each other?" Her enthusiasm was instantly extinguished after being splashed with a bucket of cold water. She retracted her hand resentfully and shrank into her man's arm. She thought to herself, no wonder the girl doesn't want to marry you. She was so fierce to him. She was being forced to marry him. Perhaps it was because Mu Yaja was sitting next to her, but Yun Shusher's back was straight and her back was straight. She was like a primary school student who was in class for the first time. She stared straight ahead without moving. Mu Yaja glanced at her indifferently and inched closer to her ear. His voice was strangely gentle. "Are you very unwilling to marry me, hm?" This voice was so gentle that it made one's hair stand on end. Yun Shusher was slightly stunned and her heart trembled. Answer me." Yun Shusher immediately lifted her head and answered matter-of-factly, "I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." "Really?" "Absolutely, from the bottom of my heart." The conversation between the two of them attracted a lot of attention. Everyone looked at them curiously, thinking that this newlywed couple was very interesting. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously and said coldly, "Then don't let me see your face that looks like you're being forced into marriage again." Face that looks like she's being forced into marriage. Yun Shusher touched the corner of her mouth gloomily. She had to admit that she almost choked to death because of this word. Was her face really that ugly right now? The line moved forward in an orderly manner and it was soon their turn. Before Yun Shusher could react, Mu Yaja grabbed her wrist and practically dragged her all the way to the registration counter. Yun Shusher felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She looked at Mu Yaja again and saw that his face was still as calm as water. There was no expression on his face, be it the joy of being newlyweds or the disappointment. Why was he always so calm about everything he did? Chapter 1667. Mu Yaja had put in a lot of effort. Everything was ready and they just needed to take a photo and stamp it. After the photo was taken, the two of them sat at the reception desk. The woman looked up at Yun Shusher and felt a little strange. She wondered if the two of them were willing to get married. However, she didn't want to be a busybody. Just as she was about to hit the stamp, she saw Yun Shusher suddenly jump up like a little puppy. She held the woman's hand that was holding the stamp tightly and shouted, "Wait." After she said that, the staff was shocked by her. They looked up blankly and stared at her blankly. After a while, they asked blankly, "What? What's the matter?" See, it was indeed a forced marriage. Was there a need to be so shocked? Only then did Yun Shusher realize what she had done. Blinking her eyes, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine and shuddered. She turned around stiffly and saw that a certain man's face was ashen and extremely gloomy. Her roar attracted everyone's attention. They stared curiously at the couple and began to whisper to each other. "It's over, it's all over now." Earlier on, she had grabbed her hand subconsciously. She didn't know why, but when she saw that the stamp was about to hit the stamp, her heart was filled with curses. She didn't know what was wrong with her. She was so agitated that her hand slipped. "What's the matter, female comrade? Why aren't you talking?" Yun Shusher reacted and looked at the man beside her. Suddenly, she asked seriously, "Have you thought it through?" Mu Yaja's expression changed. "Have you thought it through and decided that you want to be with me for the rest of your life?" She probably didn't feel safe. Happiness seemed to have fallen from the sky. She was so worried about her gains and losses that she was trembling with fear and didn't even dare to stretch out her hand to catch it. Mu Yaja frowned. "Are you regretting it? This damned woman." When he proposed to her, she had clearly agreed. Was she regretting it now? Yun Shusher smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that you'll regret it." She was afraid that she would lose her happiness after having it. She was afraid that if such a day came, she would feel as if it was the end of the world. The staff member was speechless. Her hand that was about to hit the stamp froze in midair. Muyaja stared at her face and suddenly smiled deeply. He hugged her shoulders and kissed her passionately on the lips. Their breaths touched. As he kissed her, he pressed his lips against hers and said word by word, "I've never regretted the things I've done." Yunshusher's heart trembled. She was so happy that she felt numb. Was this a promise to her in disguise? The staff member was caught off guard and was a little hurt. "So," she asked again, "are you still planning to get married?" "Not." The two of them looked at her and spoke in unison. The staff member was dumbfounded once more. "I'm sorry, sister. I was just afraid that the stamp wouldn't be dark enough." Yunshusher smiled and pushed the stamp over. She finally had the sweetness of a newlywed. "Dip it in more. Be a glorious witness for us." Did this girl think that she was a revolutionary? Chapter 1668. Yunshusher was in a good mood. She said casually, "Congratulations to you too." Muyaja's expression turned even colder as he glanced at her coldly. This woman was so stupid that she was hopelessly stupid. But he was also hopelessly in love with her. 2 red booklets were placed in her hands. Yunshusher flipped open the marriage certificate. In the photo, the two of them were wearing white shirts. They were looking at the camera, smiling as they snuggled up to each other. As she looked at it, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Her mood was as though she was sitting on a hot air balloon, slowly floating into the clouds. She was married. They were married. On the 25th of December 2016, she married herself to him. She was so elated that when she walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she still felt like she was floating. "Look." Yunshusher was as happy as a child. She showed the marriage certificate to him. "We're married." Muyaja looked at her dotingly and smiled. I know." "Muyaja, look, it's our photo." Yunshusher flipped open the marriage certificate and showed the photo of the two of them. She asked jokingly, "Don't we look very compatible?" Muyaja couldn't help but laugh. Women are really fickle. Yunshusher's smile faded a little. She didn't understand. "Why do you say that?" Muyaja said, "On the way here, you were so unwilling. Now, you're so happy." Yunshusher retorted, "Hey, that's not called unwilling. Early in the morning, you suddenly pulled me to the Civil Affairs Bureau without a word of discussion. If it wasn't for the glaring sun outside, would have thought that I was still dreaming." He pinched her cheeks. His fingertips were so strong that she frowned in pain. "Pain? What are you doing? You know pain?" "Of course." Muyaja's smile deepened. "So now you believe that this isn't a dream?" Yunshusher smiled and suddenly turned around to face him. She reached out her arms and held his shoulders. He was so tall that when she hugged him tightly, she had to stand on her tiptoes. "How nice." Yunshusher snuggled in his arms and suddenly said something that made him not know whether to laugh or cry. "Finally, we're not driving without a license." Muyaja, this stupid woman. But no matter how she was, he liked her. After getting into the car, she spread her hands. "Give it to me." Muyaja stared at her coldly before taking out his wallet and handing over a few bank cards to her. She widened her eyes in shock. "What are you doing?" Muyaja enunciated, "I'll hand over my bank card." "Yunshusher, you'll be in charge of the daily expenses." "You? Do you have to be so self-conscious?" Yunshusher was shocked by his self-awareness. She only cared about money. Little money grubber. Muyaja couldn't help but give her a knock on the head. "What else do you want?" Yunshusher rolled her eyes. "Of course it's your ID card." So she wasn't asking for his bank cards? Muyaja looked at her again, but his gaze was a little strange. Yunshusher felt that he was looking at her as if he was looking at a pig. "Your gaze is very insulting," she reminded him carefully. Muyaja ignored her. He opened his wallet and passed his ID card to her. Chapter 1669. She was not reserved at all. She had just registered her marriage, and she was already calling him husband. Muyaja was annoyed, but in his heart, he was happy to be called husband. 880214. Is it your birthday? Yes. February 14th. That was Valentine's Day. Who would have thought that her husband was an Aquarius born on Valentine's Day? All right, thank you, my dear husband. Thus, a certain someone shamelessly put the bank card into her wallet. She was calm and collected. Suddenly, she asked suspiciously, "Are all your belongings here?" Sort of. Yunshishir was displeased. What do you mean sort of? She thought for a moment and narrowed her eyes. Are you secretly hiding money? Muyaja was speechless. Yunshishir said seriously, in the past, the CEO of our company handed his salary card to his wife, but he secretly deposited a card with a lot of money in it. Don't tell me you're hiding money too. Muyaja glanced at her coldly and said, "Honey, you're so cute. How can those men compare to me?" When he called her, honey, she instantly blushed. Now, she was still not used to being called that. But she had to get used to it slowly, didn't she? Then, she said in amusement, "Why can't we compare? Is there a difference?" Muyaja smiled. Of course there's a difference. Yunshishir was a little confused. What's the difference? What was the difference? Just this salary card alone was different. Those big bosses, even if they handed over their salary cards to their wives, which one of them did not have other cards in their hands? Some of them, although they were CEOs in name, were hired by the board of directors or with high salaries. Their income could be felt. But it was different for him. He was the owner of Dishing Financial Group. Just the small change in his account was enough for the bank to make a huge profit. The daily interest could reach 8 figures. This was definitely not a bluff. For a huge financial group like Dishing, just the capital chain in their hands was impressive. With such a huge capital chain, the interest in the banks under the Mu Group just kept growing. It was already difficult to calculate. Moreover, with his status, how could it be just an account? The funds in the dozens of accounts under his name were constantly rolling in. What was a salary card? All he knew was that he was paying the salaries of hundreds of thousands of Dishing Financial Group employees. His so-called salary cards were probably just a few of the accounts under his name where he could move his funds. An account was an account, and property was property. His bank account wasn't fixed like those bosses. If he had to describe it, it was like a black hole in the universe. He couldn't see it and couldn't see its bottom. Even he himself didn't know how deep and how big it was. The balance in the card kept accumulating every day. It was probably inexhaustible even if he used it all his life. Therefore, the funds in the account he gave Yunshishir included about 70% of the movable assets under his name. However, the amount in these accounts could only be said to be a fraction of his personal assets. After all, money would depreciate. After all, in today's inflation, the speed of currency depreciation was not something the bank's interest could keep up with. Chapter 1670. Therefore, most of the assets under his name were invested in real estate and other projects, such as resorts, hotels, shares of listed companies, consortiums, fund pools, private islands, and private land rights. The few digits in his account were just for appetizers. His assets were active, and every day, a few digits would be added to his account. However, even if it was just a fraction to him, to this stupid woman, it might be an astronomical figure. If she went to the bank to withdraw money, the deposit machine wouldn't show the exact amount. She had to be personally received by the VIP service at the counter to withdraw money. Even the bank's lobby manager had to clear the way for her. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, he specially prepared a small bank card for her. The card had about 8 digits in savings, which could be used for daily expenses and groceries. If Yunshishir knew that her beloved husband had prepared an 8-digit bank card for her to use to buy groceries, she would be so angry that she would vomit blood. Poor stupid woman. At this moment, she was thinking in her heart. If she tied his bank card to a shopping website, wouldn't she be able to buy without worrying about the account balance being insufficient? If Muyaja knew that she was only capable of this, he would be so angry that he would vomit blood. Perhaps this was the part where the two of them needed to get used to each other the most. Yun Shishir had lived a hard life since she was young. She wished that she could break $1 into $2 to use. Where she could save, she scrimped and saved. She would never be extravagant or wasteful. The biggest temptation of acting was probably the high income. Acting in a show, A-list celebrities could earn hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per episode. Although it was tough, if they were successful, the glory and benefits that came with it were also very tempting. However, in her eyes, hundreds of thousands was already considered a lot. In Muyaja's eyes, it was beneath contempt. He had lived in such an environment since he was young, so he was almost numb to the concept of money. They were like people from two different worlds. In Yun Shishir's eyes, those few thousands of dollars of wages that were calculated over every ounce were nothing in his eyes. If she knew that he could easily buy an economically developed first-tier city with his ability, how would she feel? If she knew that he could buy 2 countries, would this woman be petrified from shock? She didn't seem to have estimated his net worth at all. She also didn't seem to know what the Mu group meant. His woman didn't know how terrifying her man was. He was clearly a heavenly dragon, but in her heart, she felt that he was no different from a snake on the ground. This had made him a little depressed. At first, she acted as if she didn't care about him no matter how rich he was. At that time, he thought she was an idiot. Slowly, he began to suspect that this woman was pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. She was very scheming and shrewd. It was not until later that he realized that she was an idiot. She was different from those women who were good at scheming. She might be a little stupid, but he liked her pure and unadulterated personality even more. Yun Shishir didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly, she nudged him with her elbow. "You didn't regret handing over your bank card?" Muyaja smiled but didn't say anything. She threatened, "Don't blame me when I squander all your money." Chapter 1671. It just so happens that I lack a woman who can squander my family fortune for me. Muyaja's lips curled up. His eyes were conceited and domineering, with a hint of domineering indulgence. Man! He had built this Mu empire just so that one day, his woman and child could live a happy and prosperous life. Other than that, even if he had shocking power, it was meaningless. Yun Shishir was a little overwhelmed by his domineering words. She had only heard men say this before, "I lack a woman who can run the house diligently for me." But she had never heard a man say this in such a bold manner, "I lack a woman who can squander my family fortune for me." He said this naturally because he had the confidence to do so. Yun Shishir could not help but want to pour cold water on him. She giggled and said jokingly, I don't believe you when you say this now." He was puzzled. "Why?" Yun Shishir said seriously, "If you dare to say this before Singles Day, then you are a real man." Muyaja was speechless. This stupid woman. Muyaja stared at her face with a deep gaze. Yun Shishir saw his gaze and raised her eyebrows as if she was provoking him. "Why? Am I right? No matter when, I dare to say such words." Muyaja liked how she acted like a clown. He could not help but pinch her cheeks and smile. "If you have the ability, squander my money." He did not believe that she would lose more than he earned. Yun Shishir smiled and pretended to be a clown as she leaned closer to him. She held his arm and giggled. "Tycoon, if you are so rich, do you lack pendants on your legs?" "Nope." Yun Shishir's smile disappeared and she pretended to be wronged as she stared at him. Unexpectedly, he leaned closer to her and stared into her eyes. He said teasingly, "I lack a place in my heart. Do you want it?" His voice was so charming and his breath was like orchids. His warm breath brushed against her cheeks. His ambiguous words of love made her blush and her heart beat faster. However, he rarely said sweet nothings. Occasionally, he would say a sentence, but it was impossible to resist. Yun Shishir's face instantly turned as red as blood. It was unbelievably hot. She seemed to be shy so easily. Even if she didn't express it, the blush on her face betrayed her. Her skin was extremely fair. Thus, at this moment, the flush on her face was simply unable to conceal her helplessness and shyness. Yun Shishir suddenly thought of something. She looked up and asked curiously, "Hey, I want to ask you, why did you suddenly drag me to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our marriage certificate?" "Hello?" Muyaja raised his eyebrows slightly. Clearly, he was dissatisfied with the way she addressed him. "Honey, pay attention to your words. What should you call me?" Yun Shishir blushed again. She didn't seem to be able to adapt so quickly. She knitted her brows. Under his deep gaze, she said shyly, "Han." "Hubby." Muyaja raised his eyebrows in relief. Clearly, this form of address was even more pleasing to the ear. "Call me that again." Yun Shishir was like a child who was learning how to speak. She lowered her head slightly and consolidated her revision under his guidance. "Hubby, you're too soft. Hubby. Be gentler." Yun Shishir cleared her throat and said softly, "Hubby." Chapter 1672. In the next second, the man suddenly came up to her, his large palm firmly holding the back of her neck. In the next second, his warm thin lips covered hers. He didn't take her by force. It was just a simple kiss. He covered her small pink lips and couldn't bear to move an inch. Their faces were very close. His eyes were half open, and his thick and long eyelashes were intertwined with hers. It was unbelievably intimate. They were so close that Yun Shishir could only see a pair of deep and mesmerizing eyes with her eyes half open. They were endless. But they also seemed to be hiding a vast galaxy of stars, shining brightly. Anyone who looked at them would fall into that tenderness. She wondered if this man would pamper her. She felt that in front of him, she was being pampered and indulged like a little princess. It was as if in that broad embrace, she could do whatever she wanted. But, being pampered by someone, it was inevitable that she would feel worried. The more infatuated she was, the more she was afraid of losing him. However, even if it was just for a second, she didn't want to wake up from this tenderness. Yun Shishir hugged his shoulders and deepened the kiss. After Muyaja sent her home, he decided to make a trip to the office. There were still a few meetings in the office waiting for him to take charge of the overall situation. Hence, he had to make a trip there. Yun Shishir couldn't help but feel a little worried. "Aren't you going to rest? You don't seem to have rested well." Muyaja saw the tenderness in her eyes and was interested. "Is your heart aching?" Yun Shishir coughed and glared at him, seemingly wanting to say something. Muyaja smiled. "Be good and wait for me at home. Wait for me at home." These words warmed her heart. Yun Shishir pursed her lips and looked at him. She reminded him shyly, "Come back early." "Okay." After Muyaja finished speaking, he turned the car around and drove off. Yun Shishir returned home. The moment she opened the door, she saw Yun Yecheng sitting upright in the living room, looking anxious as if he had been waiting for her for a long time. Yun Yeho, on the other hand, was sitting at the side with Yu Yu serving him a cup of hot tea. Upon seeing her return home, Yun Yecheng stood up abruptly and went straight to the point. "Shishir, where did you go so early in the morning?" Yun Shishir was stunned. She looked at Yun Yecheng, only to see him looking worried and his mind going blank for a moment. How could she forget that she hadn't asked for Muyaja's opinion when she registered her marriage with him? It was as if the two of them were eloping. They sneaked to the Civil Affairs Bureau and got a marriage certificate. However, it happened so suddenly that she didn't have the chance to report it to him. Yun Shishir replied, "Dad, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau this morning." "Civil Affairs Bureau?" Yun Yecheng raised a brow suspiciously. Then, as if he had thought of something, he asked doubtfully, "Did you register your marriage with him?" Yun Shishir pursed her lips and nodded slowly. Yun Yecheng's gaze fell on the two marriage certificates she was holding tightly in her hands. His face froze for a moment. "You too?" registered your marriage? Why so sudden? He had just returned to the capital yesterday, and that mysterious and honorable man seemed to have fallen from the sky and become his son-in-law. After one night, he had actually jumped from a prospective son-in-law to a legitimate son-in-law. He could not figure it out. Chapter 1673. Yun Yeqing looked at Yun Shishir in disbelief. Frowning, he opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. In the end, after pondering for a long time, he suddenly asked in a deep voice, "Have you really made up your mind? Dad, are you really ready to get married? Marriage isn't like dating. There are many things to consider. It may sound complicated, but marriage and love are different." As he spoke, he frowned with a conflicted expression. He was obviously very depressed. His daughter had registered her marriage with another man without saying a word. Until now, he still felt a little confused. Why was he so confused? Shishir, this is too sudden. Dad really isn't ready yet. Yun Yeqing shook his head and sighed. From his nervous expression, it was obvious that he was very worried. He was afraid that she had made a decision on a whim and had not thought it through at all. She had so easily entrusted her life to a man she did not know very well. Yes, his daughter was already 24 years old. She was already an adult and mentally mature. She was fully capable of making her own decisions about marriage. He had no right to interfere with her marriage. However, no matter how old she was, in his eyes, she was still a child who had not grown up yet. Therefore, he could not accept her sudden decision for the time being. There were a lot of things to pay attention to when getting married. Getting married wasn't as simple as getting a marriage certificate. Falling in love was a matter between two people. Marriage, on the other hand, was a matter between the man and the woman and the family. From the ceremony, asking for the name, choosing the bride and groom, every step was very serious and could not be sloppy. But she actually registered her marriage in a flash. Wasn't it a little too hasty? Yun Shishir smiled and held his hand. Dad, I know you have a lot of worries. I also know that this marriage seems rushed and careless in your eyes. But I'm ready to start a family. Being able to spend the rest of my life with him is a matter of careful consideration. I feel very lucky and blessed, Dad. Don't worry about me, I can make decisions for my own life. Hearing this, Yun Yeqing's heart calmed down and his nervous expression eased a little. He heaved a sigh of relief and said earnestly, Shishir, don't misunderstand. I'm not blaming you for not reporting to me when you registered your marriage. It's just that, it's a little sudden. Dad can't accept it right away. However, Papa's attitude was very clear. Papa hopes that you can be happy, and not because of a moment of impulse, hastily decide your happiness for life. However, you're mature and sensible. You've always had your own thoughts and considerations. You won't make a muddle-headed decision. Dad also believes in your vision and any decision you make. After a pause, he placed his hand on the back of her hand and patted it gently. He sighed. No matter who it is, as long as it's a man you fancy, Daddy will unconditionally support him. As long as the future is decided by you, Dad will sincerely bless you. She hugged him and said emotionally, Dad, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for forgiving me. Maybe I was a little stubborn this time and made you worry. Chapter 1674. Behind them, Yin Yeho was surprised to learn from their conversation that Yun Shishir had already gotten her marriage certificate. He pushed his wheelchair toward her and asked in surprise, Shishir, you've already gotten your marriage certificate? Yes. Yun Shishir nodded. Yun Yeho was stunned to hear this. Then, he smiled with heartfelt joy in his eyes. Shishir. I'm so happy for you. He turned around, only to see a complicated look on his father's face, which was filled with slight dissatisfaction. Brother. Look at you, why do you look like that? Shishir has gotten her marriage certificate, it's a joyous occasion. This means that I'm in luck. It looks like I'll be able to attend Shishir's wedding soon. After a pause, he shifted his gaze to Yun Shishir and said, Shusher, Uncle sincerely wishes you all the best. I hope that you'll live a happy life. Yun Shusher was touched. Thank you, Uncle. Yun Yecheng asked, where is he? The he was referring to was probably Muyaja. Yun Shusher replied, he still has work to do. He went to work after sending me home. Yun Tianyu and Xiao Yichen gathered around. The mischievous Xiao Yichen snatched the 2 marriage certificates from Yun Shusher's hands and flipped through them with Yu. He then exclaimed exaggeratedly, wow. Mommy is so beautiful. Daddy is so handsome. A handsome man and a beautiful woman, they're a match made in heaven. Yu glanced at him coldly and teased, yo, Xiao Yichen, you're not simple at all. You finally used 2 idioms correctly, that's praiseworthy. Xiao Yichen was greatly provoked. He straightened his back and said seriously, I'm a cultured person. Yu mercilessly displayed his unparalleled sharp-tongued skills. Xiao Yichen, since you're so thick-skinned, why don't you lend me some for the winter? Xiao Yichen's face instantly crumbled. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Yu, he was not as eloquent as Yu. In terms of bickering, he was completely at a disadvantage. Xiao Yichen was so angry that he was about to cry. Yu saw that he was about to cry and immediately comforted him, don't lower your head, the crown will fall off. Don't cry, Yu will laugh. After saying that, a certain evil little munchkin even reached out his hand to rub Xiao Yichen's tender cheeks. Little Yichen looked at him innocently, letting him do whatever he wanted. Seeing the 2 children fooling around, Yun Yecheng and Yun Yeho could not help but laugh. Yun Shusher could not stand it anymore. She grabbed Yu's little hand and slapped it twice. Yu, don't bully your brother. Xiao Yichen resentfully extended his little paw at her. Mommy, Yu snorted at the side. Xiao Yichen, you've grown up. Now you know how to act pitiful to gain sympathy. Humph. I'm not playing with you anymore. Xiao Yichen turned around with a look that said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Yu smiled helplessly and walked over. All right. Daddy and Mommy are registering their marriage today. Let's get along peacefully, okay? Really? Xiao Yichen turned around and stuck out his little finger. Okay. Pinky swear. After the family had lunch, Yun Shusher drove to the hotel. Along the way, she asked Qin Zhou and Mu Shi to help her find a relatively quiet neighborhood where she could settle her siblings. Just as she arrived, she heard her daughter complaining. Shusher, why are you only here now? Didn't you say that you'll pick us up in the morning? Chapter 1675. Yun Qingmiao probed from the side, Shusher, don't tell me that you slept in early and couldn't get up. Yun Shusher explained, I had something on earlier, so I came late. Xiang Yu, who had already changed her clothes, walked out of the room and asked, have you arranged a house for us? She asked with a righteous tone, as if she were ordering her about like a servant, without the slightest bit of politeness or courtesy. Logically speaking, Yun Shusher had no obligation to settle everything for them. Looking for a house was their own business, so there was no need for her to arrange everything for them. However, Yun Shusher had done so for the sake of Yun Yecheng and the fact that they were her distant relatives. Still, she felt that the woman's attitude was not polite at all. It was as if Yun Shusher was expected to do so. Even someone with a good temper like her could not help feeling a little uncomfortable when she heard the woman's words. She mumbled, not yet. I've already asked a friend to look for a quieter neighborhood. I'll bring you guys over to take a look right away. Only then did the woman nod in satisfaction. All right. Yun Qingmiao and Yun Qinli exchanged glances before they suddenly asked Yun Shusher, is the house price in the capital expensive? It's all right. We just came to the capital not long ago, so we don't have much savings on us. Can you bear the rent for us first? We'll talk about it after we've established a foothold in the capital. Although she was negotiating with her, her tone did not sound like she was willing to negotiate at all. Yun Shusher furrowed her brows but did not refuse. She had originally intended to bear the rent for them first, but the moment they said it, it sounded a little different. Still, Yun Shishir was an introverted person. Even though she felt uncomfortable, she did not take issue with them. After they were done packing their luggage, Yun Shishir paid for the room and drove them to the address Mu Shi had sent her. Along the way, Yun Qingmiao sat in the front passenger seat and leisurely browsed the passing scenery outside the window. In her boredom, she looked around the car when her gaze suddenly landed on Yun Shishir. Finally, she caught sight of the dazzling diamond ring on the latter's ring finger, which was holding the steering wheel. It was a 1-carat pink diamond. Yun Qingmiao had heard that pink was a rare color among diamonds. Moreover, it was an exquisite 1-carat diamond. Hence, there was some incredulity in her eyes, but more than that, suspicion. Is this diamond ring real or fake? She asked suspiciously as she looked around. Yun Qinli's attention immediately. She followed Yun Qingmiao's gazes, and saw the eye-catching resplendent ring on Yun Shishir's finger. Subconsciously, he exclaimed, "Wow! This diamond ring is so big. It's so bright that it doesn't seem real." Yun Shishir smiled but did not say anything. At the side, Yun Qingmiao asked, "Shishir, is this diamond ring real or made of crystal?" Yun Qinli answered matter-of-factly, "It must be real. If it's not, it'll be very embarrassing to wear it on one's finger and be recognized by people who know. Still, I can't tell if it's real or fake, nor can I tell." Chapter 1676. After receiving Yun Shishir's message, she quickly contacted a few houses and was now waiting at the entrance of the neighborhood for quite some time. After parking the car, Yun Shishir put on a mask and got out of the car. The assistant went up to her with a smile. "Shishir, are you not on set these few days? I heard that the director has arranged for you to rest since it's your birthday." Yun Qingmiao, who was listening at the side, raised a brow when she caught the hint. She asked in surprise, "Set? Director?" After a pause, she asked Yun Shishir in shock, "Shishir, are you acting now?" Yun Shishir gave an ambiguous answer. "You can say so." She was a little unhappy, though. She felt that she was trying to hide something from her. Without giving her a chance to ask, Yun Shishir said, "Let's go take a look at the houses first." With that, she stepped forward and quickly pulled her to the side. "Don't mention my identity, understand?" Mu Shi was also confused. "Shishir, I'm the one who wants to ask you. Why do you want me to help you find a house for no reason? Also..." She looked at the mother-daughter trio behind Yun Shishir and felt even more puzzled. "Who are they?" Yun Shishir sighed. "Distant relatives. I have to take care of them on this trip to the capital and help them to settle down." "Distant relatives?" Mu Shi frowned and suddenly felt a little worried. "Shishir, I'm not trying to sow discord. I just feel that the three of them aren't easy to deal with." She had been in the industry for many years. Although she was not a shrewd person, she had seen countless people. In her line of work, it was basic for her to learn how to read people's expressions. More often than not, it required her to have a rough idea of a person's character with just one look. Her first impression of Xiang Yu and her two daughters was not very good. She said worriedly, "I didn't know that they are your distant relatives. I let it slip just now." "Shishir, don't get too close to them in the future. You are now on the rise in the industry. Try not to cause trouble." "I understand." Yun Shishir gave her a brief rundown of the situation. The assistant understood, so she walked up to her aunt and greeted her with a smile, "Hello, Auntie. I'm Shishir's colleague. Today, I'll be bringing you guys around the house so that we can settle in as soon as possible." Xiang Yu looked around and suddenly frowned. She said in a strange tone, "Why is this neighborhood so secluded? It seems to be in a very remote location. It's not very lively." Mu Shi was speechless. "Auntie, it's like this. It's still daytime now, and everyone in the neighborhood is at work." "Oh." Xiang Yu was still a little worried. "Don't find me a house that's too remote. It'll be dangerous." "How could that be?" This place wasn't remote. Although it was a little far from the city center, the transportation routes were very convenient. There was a bus stop right outside the neighborhood. Not far away was the subway line 3, which went straight to the city center. It's not that remote. She had put in a lot of effort in looking for a house, but the capital's housing prices were shocking, after all. The closer it was to the city center, the more expensive it was. She was rather meticulous in her selection. Yin Shishir was more assured with her handling the matter, so she brought the mother-daughter trio upstairs to look at the houses. However, when they looked at the houses, Yun Xingmiao and Yun Qinli started complaining. Chapter 1677. Forget about her fear of heights. She actually said that the house was too small. She broke out in a cold sweat at the side. Of course, the house was small. This was an apartment building. Unlike the self-built houses in the countryside, the property prices here had always been high. Even after working for so long and saving up for so many years, she still could not save enough for the down payment of a house. It was the dream of many to be able to settle down in the capital. However, most people could only sigh at the sight of the rising property prices. Alas, Yun Xingmiao's casual remark was, "The house is really small. Buying a house like this would cost 2 to 3 million yuan." She actually said that it was small. Hence, she explained, the property prices in the capital are high. Although the land here isn't as expensive as some other areas, the land price is still considerable. That's why, the rent is also very expensive. I heard that Shishir is paying the rent for you guys. Her income isn't high, so she chose this place when she was looking for a house. As she said this, she did not forget to sigh. Shishir's work has actually just taken a turn for the better, so I also want to reduce her pressure. Yin Shishir was not around at this moment. Only then did the woman open her mouth and say matter-of-factly, "Hee. I'm her auntie, shouldn't she be nicer to me? It's rare for us to come to the capital, and everything hasn't been settled yet. It's only natural for us to be nicer to her." She frowned deeply. This woman was really blunt with her words. Just because she was Shishir's auntie, did Shishir have to be their slave? On what basis? Although the rent was nothing to Shishir, they were not at all courteous and did not even say a word of thanks. Given Shishir's character, she was not greedy for their gratitude, but it was too unreasonable to take other people's kindness for granted. She was a little displeased, but due to her status, she could not openly complain. Her aunt asked, "How much is the rent here?" She answered honestly, "About 4 to 5,000 yuan. 4 to 5,000 yuan? Xiang Yu gasped. So expensive? She thought that she would at least be a little more understanding towards Shishir after hearing her words, but she did not expect her next words to make her so angry that she was speechless. Ouch! Fortunately, Shishir is paying the rent for us. Otherwise, how can we afford such an expensive apartment? Yin Xingmiao, who was standing at the side, asked worriedly, "Mom, why don't we get Shishir to pay a year's rent for us first? Even if we work, it'll be hard for us to pay such a high rent." Exactly. As for Sister Shishir, it shouldn't be too difficult for her to bear the rent for a year. Mom, go and talk to her. She'll definitely agree. Yin Qinli suggested from the side. Xiang Yu nodded, apparently thinking the same thing. She had a taste of the mother-daughter trio's shamelessness. She spoke up from the side. Shishir has just started working, and you guys are asking her to bear the rent for a year. Auntie, you should be more understanding for Shishir. Xiang Yu suddenly frowned in displeasure. Yin Xingmiao asked, "Just started?" That can't be. I see that she's quite well-to-do, she even drives a Mercedes-Benz. I'm guessing that her income should be very high. Otherwise, how can she afford to drive a Mercedes-Benz? She thought to herself, it's none of your business what kind of car she drives. Even if she drives a Porsche, she has no obligation to support you guys. Chapter 1678. In the end, the two girls were dissatisfied with this aspect. She could only contact another house and bring them to look at it. Yin Shishir, who was downstairs to learn about the property, was puzzled when she saw the crestfallen girl leading the trio down the stairs. "Mushi, what do you think of the house?" She then asked her aunt, "Auntie, are you satisfied with it?" "It's too small. I think it's only about 80 square meters, it's too cramped." Her assistant explained, "The house is about 100 square meters, but the higher the floor, the lower the occupancy rate." She then turned to Yun Shishir. "Shishir, I just contacted a house in Funan district, but the bigger the house, the higher the price." "It's fine." Yun Shishir was anxious to deal with them, so she did not mind if the house price was a little higher. On the way to Funan district, Xiang Yu suddenly asked, "Shishir, Auntie has something to discuss with you." Yun Shishir replied, "Go ahead, Auntie." "Before that, Auntie wants to ask, is your monthly income high?" She wanted to find out about her income first before acting according to the situation. Yun Shishir smiled helplessly. "Auntie, just tell me what you want. I'll do my best to satisfy you." It's like this," Xiang Yu explained. "We've just arrived in the capital, so we don't have much money. I just asked that young lady about the rent, it's indeed very expensive. 4 to 5,000 a month is not something we can afford with our current conditions. We don't have much money on us, and the capital's expenses are high, so we're afraid that we won't have enough. Qingmiao and Qinli haven't found a job yet, so Auntie wants to discuss with you whether you can pay a year's rent for us first. Once their jobs are stable, he. She did not say the rest directly, but the meaning behind her words was clear. She wanted Yun Shishir to pay a year's rent for them first. Yun Shishir readily agreed. "Okay, no problem." The production team of The Green Apple had already paid her. Although it wasn't a lot and couldn't be compared to the first-tier brands, it was still a decent amount. Lin Fengtian treated her well and paid her double the amount stated in the contract. She was pleasantly surprised and grateful to him. In addition to the remuneration from the advertising contract. Therefore, to her, 40 to 50,000 was not a big number. When Xiang Yu heard her agree so straightforwardly, she became a little suspicious. How could he be so generous? She thought that Yun Shishir was going to make excuses. Once they arrived at their destination, Mushi was in charge of showing them around the house. Even though Xiang Yu was still dissatisfied with it, under her repeated persuasion, she finally agreed to settle on this place. Mushi heaved a sigh of relief and completed her mission. Yun Shishir and Mushi then moved their luggage up and sorted it out. She contacted the landlord, signed a lease contract, and paid a year's rent. Because of this, she felt a little indignant. "Shishir, your relatives are really the best." As she spoke, she repeated her friend's overboard words to her. Yun Shishir smiled lightly. All right, who doesn't have a few best relatives? Anyway, they were not going to spend the rest of their lives together. It was her fault.